JK? Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you could make sure to mute your cell phones. Out in the hall, we have a table where you can sign up to speak tonight. If you miss the opportunity to sign up to speak and during the meeting you decide you want to do that, please just step out into the hall and someone will be out there that will sign you up, and our list in front of us will populate, so we'll see that you signed up to speak. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilwoman Kim Roney is not feeling well tonight, so she is actually attending by phone. There's literally a phone over here at her microphone. So when council members are attending by phone, they are not able to vote on items, but they are able to participate in the meeting and participate in the discussion. So I'm just going to wait for... just prior to this meeting, just moments ago, the council had a closed session meeting, and as has been reported, we were discussing a number of items, but I have a statement that I'm going to read following that meeting, and that we're also going to release. So if you're a member of the press and you're trying to type this out, don't worry, we're going to send this out as well. This is a statement from the entire council that I'm reading. The City Council has completed its annual review of its appointees, the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk. In addition, as the manager's contract is approaching its first renewal period, the council has worked together to set goals and priorities with the manager as we move into the 2-year renewal period beginning December 2023. The council recognizes Manager Campbell's strong leadership and strategic focus during historically challenging times and celebrates accomplishments and has identified ongoing city challenges. The council looks forward to continuing our work with Manager Campbell and building upon our work to date and focusing on our ongoing efforts to address the needs of the community and the city. So that is a statement from all of council following our closed session, and again, that will be released here momentarily, so it will be made publicly available. I see Kim is working on that. Okay, so now to our planned agenda. We have one proclamation on our agenda for this evening, and that is declaring September 12th, 2023 as MANNA FoodBank Day, and Councilmember Sage is going to present that. And I have here that Dr. Claire Neek may be here. Please come forward, and if there's anyone else with you that you'd like to bring, you may feel free to. Sage, grab the proclamation mic if you want. Yeah, just pull it out there. Get it. Just.
So whereas MANNA FoodBank is the central food sourcing and disaster relief organization providing life-sustaining food resources for citizens in the 16 westernmost counties of North Carolina, including the Qualla boundary. And whereas MANNA began food distribution operations in 1983 and is this year celebrating its 40th year anniversary. Whereas MANNA works to empower the communities it serves by involving, educating, and uniting people in the work of ending hunger in Western North Carolina. Whereas MANNA is the primary source of food resources for over 250 partner organizations in Western North Carolina and has distributed a staggering 300 million pounds of food in its 40-year history. That's 300 million pounds. Worthy of applause. Whereas MANNA provides a free food helpline as a source of information for neighbors seeking food resources and meal programs in their community. and to receive assistance in applying for longer-term food benefits. And whereas making weekend food accessible to the 1 in 4 children that will face food insecurity in Western North Carolina is a vital piece of MANNA's work through the distribution of over 122,000 MANNA packs for kids in the last fiscal year alone. Whereas MANNA holds a commitment to serving marginalized communities in both urban and rural environments in ways that value who they are, their lived experiences, and their unique barriers to accessing food. And whereas MANNA prioritizes the health and well-being of the neighbors in its service area by advocating at the national, state, and local level for those living and experiencing the effects of poverty. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim September 12th as MANNA Food Bank Day. It is in the city of Asheville to commemorate and celebrate MANNA Food Bank's 40 years of positive impact on the people of Western North Carolina. Thank
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say a huge thank you to the council. We are so delighted by this. MANNA only works because so many people in our community contribute to this shared mission of ending hunger, and we are so blessed and grateful to live in a community where there are so many people who care deeply about this work and are willing to put in the effort to make sure that their neighbors have food on their plates each night. So thank you all for the recognition, and thanks to everyone for being part of this mission.
No, I don't. Okay, the next on our agenda is the consent agenda, and I have a request from Councilwoman Roney to consider item F separately. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item F?
Esther,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
we don't have to consider it separately if I can make a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand that. Okay, please.
I know that we got a update from our agenda briefing about this item. It's with the right-of-way adjacent to 100 Craven Street. And my original question was, and I just went to look and see what this looks like, that corner is currently a landing in the absence of a sidewalk. So you've got folks going to and from the Emma community, from the River Arts District, from West Asheville. It's on the way to the Rad Greenways, and a connection to transit and grocery. So I know we got a response, but can staff speak to ensuring that we will eventually have a sidewalk on that corner?
Yeah, this is a little bit confusing, and I see staff is here. The triangle is not within the sidewalk right away. It's actually off to the side, so it doesn't affect the ability to put in, the closing of the triangle doesn't affect the ability to put in a sidewalk. But I think what Councilwoman Roney is asking about is, what are the plans to put in a sidewalk in this area regardless of this closure question, if I understand correctly?
So I can speak to the corner where this project is located, and my understanding is that the project, which is a level 2, is required to provide sidewalks, so there will be sidewalk along both frontages, the frontage of Craven and the frontage of Hazel Mill. But I do not believe that we have any plans for, at this moment, for the property on the north side of Hazel Mill. But there are sidewalks across the street on Craven Street on both sides, I believe.
Mayor, for informational purposes as well, this item on the agenda is only to set the public hearing for us to consider this closure. So
Okay.
council is not actually voting on the closure this evening. This is a requirement per statute.
Correct, and I will provide a presentation with photos and diagrams at the public hearing.
Well, then I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I think Kim was trying to say something.
Oh,
I was just saying thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And I just had, hold on.
there was a public comment.
Yeah, and mine won't,
Grace Barron.
okay, thanks. Mine won't open. So we have one person, so for tonight, and as with every night, when you make public comment, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and if you'll just watch the lights on the lectern, green means go, orange means you're getting close to the end, and red means stop. So we have one person signed up to speak under the consent agenda tonight, and that is Grace Barron.
I came here tonight to comment on the minutes from the last meeting. 2 weeks ago, I watched from afar, heartened by the community that came to tell you once again that this panhandling ordinance is not aligned with our values and will make life harder for people who are struggling to survive in our unaffordable city. As frustrated and disgusted as I get with the actions of this council, hearing my neighbors speak from a place of love reminded me once again that your policies are not who we are. It is innately human to ask for help, and our collective care is what has allowed us to survive as a species. I heard the thread of the human family run deeply through the words of my neighbors. I even heard it from your 9-year-old daughter, Maggie, when you shared that she wants to hand snacks out the windows to those who she can see need one. Now you've claimed to change your position on criminalizing this behavior too, when really the harsher changes you wanted simply wouldn't hold up. Listen to your child, Maggie. She knows that the very reason she exists is because of the care for her needs that you give her, and I'm sure many others have participated in that too, and she knows that all people need to have their needs met to survive and thrive. I know what so many of my neighbors know, that this ordinance has no place in our community. Most people didn't even realize we had this ordinance to begin with, and now that the cops have decided they want to enforce it, the city attorney is making changes to make it enforceable due to the many court cases that clearly state that panhandling is protected speech under the First Amendment. You know it's bad this time when even Brad has to tell you all to reel back your expansion because your ideas are way out of bounds from what he thinks you can get away with. But I wouldn't even be so sure about that, Council, as you have lawsuits piling up due to violence and persecution under your reign. People don't have money, so you're going to charge them with a misdemeanor that will cost them money that they don't have and land them in the state's deadliest jail when we'll actually be paying more of our taxpayer dollars to keep people in cages. This policy is as cruel as it is counterproductive and illogical. As I join in with the call for my neighbors to stop this ordinance, I know you aren't going to listen. You do the same thing every time, pretend to care about an issue, do some community engagement, ignore the engagement, and then propose policies in the opposite direction anyway, despite an outcry from the community. You're literally making sharing a crime. Try to explaining that to our kindergartners. I know that you once all were little children who knew better than this, and I bet you've even instilled some of these very values in your own children than the ones that are the opposite of what you're enacting today. I want to thank all my neighbors who came out to speak to you, and even if you're not listening, there are many who are helping each other in our community each and every day. It is on all of us to help each other wherever we can, no matter what you all do to try to stop it. We shouldn't have to defend our right to share with one another, but here we are, and we'll continue to do so. We will love our neighbors no matter what. We will set the example for our children that you will not. I still and will always believe in us and the love that we have for one another. As Mr. Rogers taught us, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers.
Thank you. Well, we've already violated our no clapping rule twice tonight, but so we have a no clapping rule. But I would encourage you, if you want to support the speaker, maybe just give us kind of a hands up or something. All right, we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. We have no other folks signed up to speak under the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. We're going to move on to the presentations and reports, and our next one, very exciting, Pack Square Plaza Visioning Concept Plan. Maybe a cumbersome title, but still very exciting. And I have here that Mitchell Silver is somewhere. Yes, there you are. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Mitchell Silver. I'm a principal with McAdams and a project manager for the Pack Square Vision Plan. First, I want to just commend you for having the courage to authorize such an important planning effort. I have to say, throughout the planning process, I was quite moved by the stories shared by the residents, left quite an impression, and you'll see through this presentation, we try to reflect that back into the vision plan. I do want to go over 4 of the key takeaways of this effort. 1, the city and county investment in this planning process resulted in a vision plan that can successfully be used for all purposes originally intended. The community's input has been refined into 10 themes or values that can guide future decision-making in this area. There are 10 community-supported design ideas or projects that can be used to further the community's short and long-term vision for the area. And then finally, the momentum behind the vision will be continued via a city-county partnership funded by the Mellon Foundation. Without reading them all, we were given at the start of the process, and again, I'm very delighted to work with the planning staff, and congratulations to Stephanie Monsendal for being now planning director, very exciting. We wanted to make sure that we met the objectives, the 5 objectives that we were asked to take on in this planning effort. As I stated, what was key to this process was public engagement. In fact, it was Stephanie that said that the engagement is as important as the end product, and we wanted to make sure we took the engagement seriously. Our role was to listen and hear the voices, and we did that in a number of ways, through focus groups and listening sessions. And as a result of listening to the residents, we came up with 10 themes, and these themes inspired us to come up with the 10 ideas, which you're going to see momentarily. So here are those 10 design ideas. Again, these was inspired by the residents and those that participated in our public meetings. And so the first is that the goal was to really create new spaces in the plaza for civic engagement and expression, storytelling, oral history, public art, and central gathering place. You also see in the upper left-hand corner is a concept plan to show how this space can be activated. From the very beginning, we recognize that the current Pack Square Plaza is object-centered. It has fountains, it has elements, but is not people-centered. And the goal is to make this an active space, and you can see the Belshire Festival, which people recalled many times. It was a destination where people can come together and share stories and memories. And it's our goal to make sure that this becomes the heart of Asheville, a welcoming place for all. And we shared precedent images from around the country, Philadelphia, and other places to show what is possible in this space. I'll go over this one very quickly, but there was concern about safety crossing Broadway Street, and so there's a recommendation to just move a crosswalk. And then there was a lot of conversation about the Vance Monument. We recognize it is still waiting a decision from the North Carolina Supreme Court, but there are recommendations if the court deems it to stay or be removed. We made sure there are recommendations. The public was loud and clear. If it is removed, it should not be replaced with another monument. This is one of the key and essential recommendations, and this is to activate the north edge of Pack Square Plaza. Right now, the Biltmore building sits there. There's a raised, elevated lawn, and the recommendation was to activate the space on this edge. Either you can build into the ground floor, or there can be kiosks. What this will do, number one, is activate the base of the building, make Pack Square a destination, but also make it a safer place. When you activate a space, it makes it a lot safer. And so this is 2 options that can be explored in the future, one that requires some construction, but the other can just have some very attractive kiosks for food or even a gift shop at the Biltmore building should they want to sell their beautiful wine at this location. This one was very emotional. We heard so many stories of past harm in Asheville. Many stories, many from people of color, indigenous, and the Black community. And so we want to create a special space, a space for healing, a space for reflection and storytelling. We looked at the lawn that is right in front of the Biltmore, further down near Market Street, and felt that this should be a location for meditation growth. To make this unused space have a purpose, we gave some examples of how it could be used. Like I said, a space for reflection. This is an example in Houston where they use the storytelling globes to share the story about some of the local residents of that community. So we're not saying you have to replicate this, but it was important to give that place a space for healing and reflection and to share stories about Asheville that aren't always told. Another key recommendation, which we heard loud and clear from the residents, and it was overwhelming, please close North Pack Square. This is the street you see right now and currently has a mural, and people felt this street was not necessary, but by closing it, you're now increasing the footprint of the plaza for more usable and functional space by bringing everything at grade. And so this one was absolutely key to make sure that the space is more usable and more functional and complement those uses that would be at the base of Biltmore building. This one also was a popular recommendation, was to continue to make College Street from one-way to two-way. Currently, College Street is two-way, that terminates at Market Street. By creating College Street to two-way, you could now divert the emergency vehicles that travel down South Pack Square, very often interrupting a lot of the activities and fairs that happen on weekends. And by doing that, you could now create South Pack Square Street into a shared street, very similar to Wall Street, all at grade. You still can allow ADA access, deliveries, emergency access, but it would once again start to increase the space itself of Pack Square Plaza, where it could be better activated, and that way the emergency vehicles can still get to the municipal building. They can just do it by way of College Street. Now, there are quite a few recommendations dealing with Market Street and the block. Throughout our conversation, we've heard many stories about the East End and the block, the harm that was created, and we felt it was important. With the block just being one block away from Pack Square Plaza, there was not a strong connection. Our recommendation is to create a cultural corridor that connects Pack Square to the block and create an active cultural corridor, both physically but also emotionally, to make sure we help to repair some of the past harm. These are just some former images I'm sure you are familiar with of the East End and Pack Square, and the other slide just shows some of the key assets in that area. So at a high level, the cultural corridor has these proposed amenities. There are public spaces, there's the corridor itself, there are some ideas about the municipal building, and there are gateways. The key here is that we want to make sure we tell the stories and the history of what people believe are forgotten and erased. And it was important that we bring that forward so that the new generation understand how important this space is to the community. If you just look at the images on the right side, it's showing what Market Street looks like today. It looks more like a parking lot. It's unattractive, it's not appealing, and at the end, you have the YMI, and you wouldn't even know it's there. Our goal is to make sure this now becomes a cultural corridor, an active street that's attractive and functional, connecting Pack Square to the block itself. One of the ideas is to create a gateway sign at the corner of Market and Court Plaza, directly in front of the municipal building. What you're seeing is an image of a young lady and a man. This image was inspired by one of your residents. Her name was Babette. She talked about her experience with walking with her father down Market Street and how he felt disrespected, humiliated, and the story moved me because I'm a father and I wanted to make sure that this needs to be a welcoming place. And this is just a recommendation for temporary art, 8 to 10 feet tall, right where you see the YMI sign, welcoming people into this new gateway corridor leading to the block. It's very important that we send these messages, and again, her story was moving, and I can tell you, Stephanie was there, many of us were brought to tears by just hearing the harm created in the past from residents that lived here. And in terms of quick wins, this quick win, the Mellon Foundation sought quick wins as we pursued that grant, and the recommendations will be implemented quickly. That's what a quick win is. One of the things we're recommending in the short term is that we could extend some of the vendor kiosks that exist in Pack Square Plaza down South Market Street so that they can establish that connection of that activity that occurs with artists and other vendors from Pack Square to the block itself. In terms of long-term recommendations, there are some ideas about what they call a flex facade. This is a fabric that can be applied on a parking deck, and this could be done any way of storytelling to start talk about some of the history of this community, the pride people have in this cultural corridor, and that's something that the residents would have to work with the existing parking deck owner to see if they could accomplish it. Another recommendation is to widen the sidewalks to see whether the vehicles can be relocated, and now there could be permanent kiosks located on the street, widen the sidewalks, that now it becomes more attractive and a destination than it is today. And then finally, looking at some of the open spaces, one is behind a municipal building, but another one is privately owned, whether we can reposition some of these spaces to complement the block of what they're trying to do. And so that too will require some engagement from the private property owner. We're very eager to see how that connection and dignity to the block can be elevated. And then finally, there's another recommendation. This is a new gateway to be established on Biltmore Avenue at Eagle Street. This is the other gateway to see whether the residents can work with the property owner of the establishment to put a beautiful mural There's one that's in Woodstock, Georgia. That's probably the most beautiful, locally artist-designed mural I have ever seen. It is inspiring. It's telling all the stories of the Woodstock region, again, done by local artists. Another recommendation is I noticed that you have these beautiful blade signs on Biltmore Avenue. But when you go to Eagle Street, you don't even know what merchants exist under that arcade. Our recommendation, and once again, is to work with this property owner to see whether blade signs can be installed, which would be an attractive gateway into the block, but also help those merchants and the public know and visitors that they're there. Finally, this is a tough one, but we heard loud and clear from the residents they would like to see more civic and community uses in the municipal building in the long term. They recognize the important public safety services that building offers with both police and fire, but they really craved another type of use, a civic use, a community use that would complement this building on Pack Square. We just gave you some images of what can be done in this space, and so this is something that we have in our report as a long-term recommendation that certainly should be explored. Other considerations, there are many, many elements. I think we counted close to 200 throughout downtown of markers and memorials and storytelling that we want to make sure that there's an inventory so that we can recognize what do we do going forward within Pack Square. There are elements that may need to be relocated. There was a very strong support for a municipal service district or a business improvement district to help manage, maintain Pack Square once it's completed, and then really encouraged a lot more inclusive and equitable programming. I'm not going to belabor this. I'm down to the last 2 slides. In the report, we suggested a phasing plan. This plan works in tandem with the Mellon Grant Foundation, the foundation grant, to make sure that there is a guidebook going forward about what should happen and when. And so this is in the report about what steps should be taken in phase 1 through phase 4. And then finally, I'll just do a summary of the Mellon Foundation grant. Again, this is in alignment with the phasing plan itself. And with the Mellon grant, one is the city to have an MOU with the Block Collaborative. This to establish trust and a partnership as this process moves forward in this grant. Number 2, the city RFQ, Pack Square Plaza and the Block. This will be additional planning and design up to construction. Priority number 3, sharing our stories program development. This is also part of the grant. This is for storytelling, which is really part of Asheville's DNA, but to make sure these stories are diverse and inclusive. And then finally, long-term funding and partnership. This is to establish our partnership to make sure the 4 phases of the Pack Square Plaza is completed. With that, it ends my presentation, and I'll entertain any questions you may have.
I thought that was fabulous. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have any questions, and I've heard the presentation because of other committee work, but I just want to express my thankfulness for our staff going and seeking this grant, this $3 million to help these efforts come to fruition. And I love the planning. I'm excited for a larger plaza-like space and more walkability and just more movement in downtown that isn't cars.
Well, thank you.
It's interesting that Pack Square has been redone so many times over the years. And, you know, the last effort, I think, was concluding in 2009 by a separate entity that worked, I think the project was maybe 18 million or something like that, which resulted in the stage and the redesign of where all the way up to where the fountain was. And but now this really, to me, feels like a more community inclusive process and expands what we consider to be that heart of downtown. So it's really exciting.
Thank you, Mayor. In the report, we actually talk about, and this is after my close to 40 years in planning and design, I have not seen the square redesigned so many times. In fact, we went through the evolution of Pack Square for the first time it was conceived, and wish we could do kind of a time motion, but you're absolutely right. This is this generation's opportunity, and this one was really centered on addressing past harm, to be a place of unity, to be inclusive and diverse and equitable, and I think that was the turning point, as well as how much there was public engagement throughout the entire process.
Yeah, very different.
I think you've all done a really nice job. I think we've all felt when we've gone to a city and you just go, man, this is really cool. There's something on this block. There's something that you feel. And it takes things like this to get you there. It's not just one sign, it's not just one activity, it's a feeling and it's an experience, and I'm really grateful for the leadership from staff to do visioning like this for our community, to do planning like this, because that's what makes cities magical and wonderful, and I can't wait to see what happens.
I do want to recognize one quick win that already occurred. As an outsider, and I was previously commissioner for New York City Parks, we looked at the tree canopy and said you need to lift them up because it just feels the sight lines are blocked. Lo and behold, when I was here the last time, the Parks Department, Forestry did limb up the trees, and for the first time I saw people sitting on the bench in Pack Square. A little intervention. Far too often our tree canopies are low. If you lift them up, it looks more inviting, more open, more safe. So congratulations for you, the city and staff for doing that.
Thank
So
you.
true.
Mayor, the only thing that I would add is in terms of the next steps. This will come back to you on September the 26th, and it will be presented, and then we will have public comment, and then hopefully action by council.
To adopt the
Yes.
plan.
We hope that you will adopt. I won't be presumptuous.
We appreciate the preview. It's always good
Yes, ma'am.
to have a preview. Thank you. Oh, can you, out there, can you please raise your hand if you have an open seat next to you?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Do we have about 8? Do we have folks in the overflow room, Maggie? Okay. I think we can fit them. Anybody, is everybody okay on temperature? Hot, cold?
We just code
How
for
are you
Esther's
feeling?
wants. How are you feeling?
I'm always hot. Try to be diplomatic about it.
On that thing.
Okay, the manager's report, next, update on organizational initiatives. Turn it over to Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. As you know, I usually try to use this time for us to discuss some important initiatives that are underway in the city or some things that are relatively trailblazing for us as an organization. And so tonight, that's what we are going to provide for you. We know that, this is a long agenda, particularly a rezoning petition, so we're going to step through this as quickly as possible. And I'm going to ask for some help in changing the slides. Christine, if you can. Okay, great. Oh, Maggie.
Fancy.
Nice. Okay, so these are the 3 initiatives that we are going to provide an update for you. The fire department, the Jeff Boyne staff ride, which I had the opportunity to participate in just briefly. Our neighborhood matching grant celebration, which was an amazing effort and partnership with neighborhoods. And then our cloud migration for our GIS initiative, which sounds like that's back of house kind of stuff, but it is very important for both us and the community in terms of, I hope, as part of this presentation, they will see the benefits of this initiative. Okay. So I'm going to start off with the, it's a tricky mouse. Start off with the Asheville Fire Department staff ride. There's a lot of words on this slide, so I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. The Asheville Fire Department, in conjunction with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, we conducted this staff ride to discuss the building fire which took the life of one of our fallen heroes, Captain Jeff Boyne, on July 28, 2011. And so this ride is meant to provide an immersive learning opportunity for people who did not experience this event to learn, and hopefully this type of loss of life will never happen again. And I'm highlighting this effort because this was the first staff ride conducted in the country. And the goal is that other communities will follow AFD and share their experience with others as well. And quite frankly, this is an opportunity for us to consistently raise the name of Captain Jeff Bowen and to commemorate the sacrifice that both he and his family made for our community. There were 2 days of the staff rides, one held for any AFD member who could attend and the other held for outside departments and agencies. Thank you. And as I said, I was able to attend and welcome our visitors at a luncheon that AFD hosted. There were 40 firefighters from across the country that attended this event and included firefighters from New York, Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Atlanta, Charlotte, and St. Petersburg. Again, the staff ride promotes continuous improvement for our fire department and for the fire service nationally. And examples of what has come about as a result of these efforts is developing and implementing such things as increased minimum firefighter staffing, implementation of behavior and physical health programs, and additional training opportunities. And I'd just like to thank the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation for conducting the staff ride. I was able to also meet some of the staff from this organization, and for HCA Mission for allowing the staff ride to be conducted at their facility where this event unfortunately occurred. And so with that, I will transition into the Neighborhood Matching Grants Awardee celebration, and that's going to be presented by Christina Israel with the Cape Department. Christina.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. As Ms. Campbell said, I'm Christina Israel, and I serve as the Community Engagement Manager with our Communication and Public Engagement Department. And I'm excited just to share some brief highlights from an event that we hosted on August 31st at the Shiloh Community Garden to honor our Neighborhood Matching Grant awardees. Since 2021, the city has allocated $159,110 through this grant program, and 23 neighborhoods have so far participated, contributing more than 2,500 volunteer hours as part of their match, as well as fundraising and in-kind donations towards their projects. These projects have included all sorts of ideas, and that's the great thing about the program. It's very community-driven, and so there have been community events such as the Easton Valley Street Community Heritage Festival, invasive species removal, and various space improvements in neighborhoods and capacity building among neighborhood organizations. So we wanted to get everyone together to just celebrate their accomplishments in an informal setting, and we were very fortunate to have the support of the Shiloh Community Association to use their community garden space. It was a beautiful evening, late summer. We had some great support from the Asheville Police Department, who brought the grill, and the staff from the Community Engagement Division to cook all the food and help us serve. So it was just a great time to get together with people from the community in a more casual setting than these meetings that we typically see them in, and just to celebrate their accomplishments. So thanks for that opportunity to share.
Thank you very much. And next, we're going to ask Holly Byron to talk about the GIS migration to the cloud. I was so glad that Holly said she would be able to present this, because I was like, I don't know about all of this technical GIS stuff. So thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor. My name is Holly Barham. I am your newish IT Services Director, and I wanted to briefly share with you some exciting work from our team. We've recently moved all our GIS servers that were located here in City Hall and re-architected them so that the necessary infrastructure is in the cloud. While this was very much a team effort, a talented in-house team of women built out the cloud infrastructure. I'd like to recognize our GIS manager. Kristen Watts is back here. It was her vision to provide faster response time, more accurate data for decision-making, and better customer service that really started us down this path. Asheville is one of the first municipalities in the country to make this migration, and it was done with no outside consulting services despite major technical challenges. Had this been led by an outside consultant, the fees would have been between $50,000 and $100,000. This is a tremendous team achievement that's already being recognized by our peer agencies. The migration to cloud infrastructure makes the City of Asheville's GIS program much more secure, resilient, and easy to maintain. It will allow staff to connect to GIS resources and asset management resources from any device and from any location. It also dramatically improves performance time required to connect and load maps and data. Similarly, this project provides for a much improved experience for community members accessing GIS resources through Map Asheville, Simplicity, and a myriad of public-facing dashboards. Using cloud infrastructure will minimize our unplanned system outages as well as planned maintenance upgrades. These benefits will translate to a better experience for the community.
Thank you, Holly. So that concludes our update. I hope that you will see that we are making strides in a lot of different areas of our organization. I really appreciate the
Can I
staff's
ask a
help in
question, Deb?
providing this presentation. Yes,
I
ma'am.
just want to ask a question. When she was talking about the GIS overlay, and he talked about the water department, will that also sort of identify where valves and things like that?
Not yet.
I was just
We're getting there.
We're getting there. I was just wondering, thank you. Okay.
But kudos on architecting this entire platform. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a simple thing.
Exactly.
I love that it was done by women also. But yeah, and also, you know, some of the critique we get from the community is, oh my God, another study. And, you know, we are a highly efficient city, and there are lots of things going on in the city. And sometimes when new things come to us, we just have to outsource. But I love that you didn't, and that you were able to own it and can now maintain it. So just big thank you. And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is this your debut at council?
It is.
Oh, hey, we're already clapping, right?
No clap.
Yeah.
Randy, we're supposed to
Thank
do
you. I
this.
would appreciate your patience. Thank you, staff.
Okay, that concludes the presentations and reports. Can't believe it's only 5:45.
I know.
Sure you don't have another? Just kidding.
2 hours to share so.
Okay, if there is anyone else in the overflow room, we've got plenty of room, I think, in here. Nope, we're good. Okay, thank you. All right, we have 2 public hearings, but the second one we're going to be continuing. So we'll begin with item A. I assume Will Palmquist is going to come racing in here. I'll talk slowly. This is a public hearing to conditionally zone 1 Oak Street from Central Business District to Central Business Expansion/Conditional Zone for the purpose of approving a conceptual master plan with the development of several multi-story buildings consisting of residential, hotel, retail, and office uses. And Will Palmquist, who is not making his debut, back again to present this item to council.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design. I will be presenting this conditional zoning petition for a project known as Project Aspire. I'll apologize in advance if the presentation's a little bit longer than usual, but necessary given the scale and relative complexity and really the transformative nature that this project represents for this area of downtown. So the project site consists of three properties located in the northeast portion of downtown. It's currently the site of the First Baptist Church, which also owns the parcel to the south, which is the State Employee Credit Union Bank, and also the YMCA on the western side of the site at Central and Woodfin Street is included as well. Here's just a better shot of that, so you can see the existing church, which is proposed to remain as part of this development, and the 2 other buildings proposed to be redeveloped, and all the expansive surface parking in between, which is obviously a great opportunity for redevelopment. The existing zoning is CBD. Due to the scale of the project, a rezoning to the CBD expansion conditional zoning would be required. The future land use is downtown. No change in that designation would be required. So I'll just go over a couple slides highlighting the overall concept plan, and we are calling this a concept plan at this stage. I'll get to a little more detail about the review process that's been developed for this project. You'll see that some of the uses have ranges, the idea being that a lot of the details have not been completely nailed down for the project, so what's being reviewed tonight is a much higher level type project than is typically before you all with the range of uses and heights and design characteristics. So we're a little bit higher level on this project than we are for other conditional zonings that are before you. So overall, what's being proposed is 1.1 million square feet of new development, broken down between uses of 400 to 650 residential units, 60,000 to 75,000 square feet of a community recreational space in the form of a new YMCA, office space between 133,000 and 250,000 square feet, commercial space between 75,000 and 120,000 square feet, and a new hotel with between 165 and 300 guest rooms. As part of that development, there would be a maximum of 2,000 parking spaces, most of which would be located in structured parking garages. So this other slide shows a little more of the scale being proposed. This is a view looking northeast. You can see the First Baptist Church here in the center of the image, Oak and Woodfin Street in the front, College Street on the side, Charlotte Street over here, and Central Avenue over here. So that's just kind of the orientation. Again, the same information on the right with more information of the uses. So building 1 would be the new YMCA space with residential and retail use. Building 2 would be the new 20-story hotel building. Building 4 on Central Avenue would be a 19-story residential and commercial building. Buildings 5 and 3 would be 6 stories. Building 3 would be more office and commercial, and building 5 would be more residential and commercial. And then this graphic demonstrates the phasing of the proposed development, which is another component and reason for this more higher level conceptual master plan approach to the project. So essentially what the idea is that the site on the eastern side of the site where the State Employees Credit Union currently exists would be developed first. That would allow for the construction of the new YMCA space to take place and the hotel building. Once the YMCA is occupied, the demolition of the former YMCA space can occur. And as part of that demolition, the new phase 2 can be built. So that's kind of the linchpin between the two, so to speak, development phases. The concept plan broken down by phases, you can see phase 1 has relatively fewer residential units as compared to phase 2. Also less commercial space. It has the hotel use and the community recreational space as well. Phase 2 would have the majority of the residential units, office space, and commercial uses as well. So these are some points just right from the project conditions outlining the review process. I'm not going to read them verbatim. But essentially, the project is being reviewed as a conceptual master plan. It's before us tonight to consider the granting of the conditional zoning, which would confer the entitlement for the general parameters of the proposal, including the range of uses, the overall heights, massing, and form, the technical modifications that we'll speak through a little bit later, and then the idea being that the project would then return in those 2 phases, and they would be reviewed as level 2 type projects, as other level 2s in the CBD are. They'd be reviewed by the Design Review Committee, where approval would be mandatory by that committee, and then also Planning and Zoning Commission to confer the zoning through a ministerial site plan review. They would not necessarily have to return to City Council as long as those future phases were mostly compliant with the conditional zoning being reviewed this evening. The DRC's review would be mostly limited to design and appearance, as noted in the last bullet, so they would not have the ability to affect the overall entitlements of the height, square footage, or massing, but the overall design would be scrutinized and need to be favorably reviewed by the DRC. So here's some more details about some of the other aspects of the project. This is a slide about the transportation elements being proposed by the project. You can see that along all 4 frontages of the project. New sidewalks would be proposed. City staff has worked closely with, from different departments, city staff has worked closely with developers to figure out the best character of these sidewalks, mostly matching the existing characteristics of the streetscapes. So you can see the varying widths of sidewalks being proposed with integrated tree grates on a couple of the streets. Where there are some existing planting strips, like the character of Oak and Woodfin Street, those elements would remain with the new reconstructed wider sidewalk. The internal sidewalks would be a minimum of 10 feet wide. There is proposed off-street bike facilities, commonly known as cycle tracks. That would be a minimum of 5 feet wide, but a typical width of 6 feet. And those are proposed along Charlotte Street, where there are currently no bike facilities, and also College Street, where there is an on-street bike facility, but this cycle track would be an upgrade to that existing facility. There are also a couple of bus stops located on the project's perimeter, one at College Street, the corner of Oak Street, and one at Charlotte Street at the corner of I-240. The project would upgrade both of these bus stops and the bus shelters to be designed with the standard city specifications. And there are a number of project conditions. The first is regarding affordable housing, and essentially that 20% of all residential units in both phases would be designated affordable to those earning at or below 80% AMI. The idea being for phase 2 is that should the project not pursue low-income housing tax credits, they would commit to doing 20% of the affordable units to accept housing choice vouchers. The project will include design elements as noted on the site. Yes.
Kim, are you asking a question?
No, I think something's going on with her line. She may have lost.
Hey, Kim, are you still there?
I'm still here. I have a question for later, but not at this time.
Oh, maybe it was hand raising. Okay, so when we hear that, it's a hand raise, I think.
Okay.
Or,
A beep?
I don't know.
Oh, I thought it was because it went on mute for some reason.
I thought it was.
Okay, anyway.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The project will also be designed in substantial conformance with the identified site plan that shows that between 50 and 75% of the ground floor will be designed, and that's 75% for 3 of the buildings and 50% for the hotel building, I believe, would have public street-facing ground floor facades that have design elements like windows and lobbies and doors and that sort of thing. Also, best efforts to preserve existing trees that are identified on the master site plan that are deemed healthy enough by the city arborist. And also the project, as required, will meet the stormwater requirements for the new development based on the existing conditions, but that 20% of the required treatment of that stormwater would be through green stormwater infrastructure devices. The project is seeking technical modifications from both the underlying CBD form code and also the hotel overlay code for the hotel use. Regarding the CBD form code, the project is proposing front yard setbacks greater than 0 feet, which will allow for enhanced public realm and streetscape. Only one of the 4 street frontages would be required to have a step back, where the building would have to go back at least 10 feet along 2/3 of the facade. That's the one along Central Avenue. The project is requesting a modification for that requirement in lieu of that, having a 20-foot wide sidewalk with a wider setback from the street. There's also a maximum horizontal distance or length of buildings when they get taller than 75 feet. That's typically 145 feet. The project is requesting that the buildings proposed would exceed that, and you can see the exceeding, the number, total length of those horizontal distances for floors above 75 feet in height for the 5 buildings located, enumerated there in those bullets, around 250 to 280 feet in length. Instead, that there would be no side step backs provided, so where they would be typically required at the 75 feet height of buildings to come in on the sides to kind of get the building skinnier as it goes up. They're requesting a technical modification for that requirement. And finally, that the project would not have to comply with minimum building coverage of 80% along the frontage line for the key pedestrian street of Oak and Woodfin Street. A lot of that's due to trying to preserve the views and view sheds to the First Baptist Church, to not crowd that view of the historic structure. And then there are two requirements in the hotel overlay that would apply to the hotel use that the project is seeking technical modifications for. So the first one being that there would be no separate storefronts for the hotel building, where typically 50% of the street-facing facades would be required to be a separate use, and also that there be no full habitable story buffering the parking garage from Charlotte Street, where typically that would be a minimum depth of a 20-foot storefront. I will mention that there are, I know, some perhaps discussions that were taking place earlier today with some of those project conditions and modifications. And I think best to leave that discussion to between the applicant and city council. So these are the conditions as presented and analyzed and reviewed for this meeting. So there may be some discussions that could take place to either tighten those up or modify them as agreeable with the applicant. So I'll just say that much. In regards to the project's consistency with Living Asheville's comprehensive plan, staff finds that the project is consistent with the future land use designation of downtown, which talks about the urban environment and character of downtown expanding, redeveloping underutilized portions of downtown, the mix of uses along with more residential uses to create a more 24/7 neighborhood as a hub of activity. And further enhancement of the public realm through green infrastructure, sidewalks, public spaces, etc. The project also supports a number of goals in the plan, including encouraging responsible growth by providing infill development in targeted growth areas, increasing and diversifying the housing supply by increasing the supply of housing, including affordable housing in proximity to schools, transit, and parks, and to increase access to safe bicycling by expanding bicycle facilities and removing gaps in the city's bicycle network. So the project has a fairly lengthy review process that it's been going through for quite a while now. It was approved with conditions at the March 6th Technical Review Committee, informally reviewed by the Design Review Committee and Multimodal Transportation Commission, as well as the Downtown Commission. Approved with conditions at the May 18th Design Review Committee, reviewed and continued at the July 19th Planning and Zoning Commission, and finally approved with conditions at the August 2nd Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Staff concurs with that Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning. I've got to answer any questions. I'll also acknowledge that representatives from the firm and company are also in attendance, and I believe have a short remarks to make, as well are representatives from the First Baptist Church and YMCA as well, and they can provide more information and answer other questions as well.
Do you want to get clarity on the?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a few questions, so if y'all want to go ahead.
So one of the questions was, I think there's some confusion. So your presentation on slide 12 says the project proposes ground floor commercial/retail uses.
But then at the technical modifications hotel overlay page, one ahead, oh, you jumped. Second to last slide. It said no separate storefronts for the hotel building. I'm just not clear if, is the bottom floor of the hotel activated or not?
It will be mostly lobby space uses that are integral to the hotel. It will have design elements that windows, doors, openings, pedestrian-oriented facades, and that sort of thing, which is what the prior slide was speaking to. It will not have, as my understanding, as presented and reviewed previously, will not have like separate uses or retail or like a separate coffee shop like we require typically, which is why this modification is included.
So maybe I've just heard differently since this was published, but maybe that we can talk with the developer when they're here. Okay.
So the reference to the commercial retail is in the other structures? Not
My understanding is they were in agreement that the bottom floor of
the hotel
the hotel
specifically?
would have retail activation similar to the hotel overlay district.
Okay, I will defer that to the applicant to clarify. So far, my understanding was that it would be more through design elements. So that condition talks about for those 5 buildings, that they'd be as similarly shown on the site plan, and that the ground floor would have, sorry, I'm just trying to summarize this here. Elements like that, it could be satisfied by commercial uses, which could be lobbies, reception areas, or pedestrian scaled facade designs, including storefronts or windows. So it won't necessarily be all commercial retail. You know, it could be offices, it could be lobbies for other uses, it could be a gym for the multifamily residential portion. So it's pretty broad in what it would allow for on all 5 buildings.
I
and
guess the
hotel.
point of it was that, as I understood in the language around hotels, and I know this is a CZ that has, circumvented the typical process, but the explanation when we reviewed this in the hotel process was that if a hotel were to be built on a block that didn't have any public uses on the bottom, it's almost like an extraction of that parcel from the community. So to the extent that we could have storefronts down there, at least the community would still use that space a little. And the example we always used was I think it's the Hyatt just at the bridge in Montford that has the pool in the bottom and the frosted windows, and locals just walk by. Whereas if it were a coffee shop or a restaurant, they could at least go in. I think that was the intent. So I want to make sure I understand, because if it's just to put the hotel lobby there, that's not really the intent. And maybe they'll be able to speak to that. But additionally, in the previous page of, nope, not that one, sorry, of other conditions, I referenced, there you go, that first part. For phase 2, 20% of these affordable units will accept the housing choice vouchers if it doesn't do a LIHTC project. But I understood that phase 1 would also accept the vouchers.
Okay, I will defer that as well.
Okay.
As drafted, phase 1 would not guarantee the acceptance of vouchers, but would still be 20% affordable. If that's changed, I can have them clarify that.
Okay.
A question I also had is, in conversations I've had, the parking was going to be around 1,400 spaces, 2 different 700 space decks, which sounded like a lot of space for parking, and now it says 2,000. So I was already really wanting to understand like justification for 1,400 spaces, and now I'm really not understanding why that would substantially increase to 2,000. Like, how many parking spaces do we have in town now?
Well, but when a developer is trying to get financing for an apartment complex, they have to have a certain number of spaces in order for the bank to say, hey, this is a viable project, we'll lend you money on it. So we have had opportunities where MHO, for example, has been able to reduce parking by demonstrating they don't need it to support the project. But typically, what I understand from the development community is that based on your region and the use of vehicles, you've got to be able to show how you can support your project through parking, even though we don't technically require it, or, so, I mean, they can probably speak more to it, but I'm assuming that's part of the challenge. And right now, we have this range, right? We have a potential housing range, right, up to 650. So if you did, what I've heard the going rate is 1.25 spaces per unit, you have that, and then you have the commercial, and you have the Y, and you have a wide range of rooms on this hotel. I'm assuming they're just trying to get, I don't know why I'm answering this question, but I'm assuming they're trying to get the flexibility to account for all those probabilities. Not
Yeah.
that,
That's absolutely correct. And that number has shifted a little bit, so that 1,400 might have been the prior minimum. It might have been 1,400 to 1,800. And then at Planning and Zoning Commission, similar concerns were brought up, and why are we having a minimum number? So it was agreed upon that just having a maximum number would be best, so there is no minimum. So they could presumably provide much fewer spaces if that was advantageous to the project, but there would be a maximum
And
imposed.
so how did we land on 2,000? Was that a staff advised number, or was that a proposal from the developer?
I think it was an agreement between the developer and Planning and Zoning Commission, and just kind of rounding up to the next digit.
The next
of
extra
1,000,
600
the next
spaces.
Very
Will that
scientific.
list,
Definitely want a city for
What's that?
cars. That's
that
what
list
we're
of
building.
conditions, is that encompassing all the conditions that you believe to be part of this? Because I have a few more that I was expecting to see on that list, but I'm not clear if we should be moving to the developer to talk to that.
Sure. I mean, those are the most relevant and high-level ones. There are a few others, some of which are boilerplate, some of which regard maximum height. I know there's some questions about the height requirements that, the project is compliant with the height. There are a couple different height zones.
What about not allowing short-term rentals in the housing, or including a bike lane that is a condition and such that it can't be removed at their discretion?
So regarding short-term vacation rentals, those would not be allowed regardless if they were in the condition or not, since they are not a principal permitted use in the CBD. So
We
they would
see
be-
that, but unfortunately, this permitting process and enforcement gets so complicated that in past projects, we've actually asked it be listed as a condition so that it could have a zoning compliance follow-up if needed.
Okay.
It's somewhat duplicative, but it would give a level of assurance. I do worry it confuses the community that they don't understand we already prohibit whole unit short-term rentals. So to be clear, our current zoning ordinance would prohibit it, but
Right.
so, I mean, you're basically saying in the condition, I agree to abide by the law.
Correct. Yeah.
And also, I'm aware of another condition that wasn't there when we met on Thursday, if this is the time
It's changing a
to
lot.
bring that forward. It reads, given the nature of a phased development proposal, the developer shall maintain an ongoing dialogue and collaboration with the surrounding community throughout the development process, consistent with the process and agreements made to date with the East End neighborhood. I just wanted to get that out there because we've received several emails regarding this point. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and we can talk with the developer
Yeah.
about that.
Right. Yeah.
Would it help to just, there's a couple more, so maybe let's just throw them all out there so that we can have a broader response. Another one that was a kind of in the weeds one was, we'd had a project before this one come to us with a large amount of acreage, and they wanted to gate and privatize certain areas of it. And when I spoke with this development team, they had agreed that they would not be doing that. And I'd like to see that as a condition, just simply because this project is so large and will take so much time and so many years that it may change over time. And this is really our only chance to get those conditions in. And we don't want to privatize 10 acres in downtown. That's not their intent now. I'm not suggesting it is, but I want to make sure that language is in there. And then
Would that even be allowed?
it happened in a project, the Cox and
Gated
Ashland.
communities are expressly prohibited, so, like.
So I think this is another
But
one of
they-
those will comply with the law conditions.
But they were able to do it, and then within half of the project, they didn't have ADA compliance either, so it was quite shocking when it came to us.
Right,
And that
well-
project has since not.
And hopefully we have some,
Cox and
that's,
Ashland. It was a big deal at the time, so I just want to make sure that we
Sure.
have these things in there to protect.
I d-
future-
yeah, and I'm only just, if folks like, what, you're gonna have a gated community in
No, no.
downtown Asheville? I mean.
To be clear,
yeah,
they're
so-
not proposing that it be a gated community. I'm simply saying in the past, we have seen this happen with projects, and we would like to prevent that. So since this is our only time to really produce conditions or agree to them, and I've talked with them about this, so I don't think this is surprising to them. And then the last one is that when I think 6 out of 7 of us were there for the hotel moratorium and process that came from it, and we kind of spelled out a review process that was pretty detailed. And once you get to a certain size, you can come to this process instead of doing the community benefits table and so on. But I propose that they actually do come up with a community benefits kind of review, and I think they've done that and prepared some points and stuff. But I understood that in the case that they were not able to produce all the phases or produce all the housing, that they would consider reverting back to some kind of table where there's contributions and point scoring and so on. And that was, I understood, to be a condition. Brad may have more around language on that, but I just want to make sure we're airing all those, so when we hear from them, we can get a complete picture of the ask, because it's getting a little confusing.
Sure.
Thank you.
This is probably a good time to hear from the developer applicant and then kind of hash out some of these other items.
While you have this up, Will, could you show
Yeah.
us where they're talking about the activation on the side? It was referred to not activating the retail on the side. Which side?
So, I mean, for hotel use, it's required on all sides. It's calculated on all sides, and you can provide it more on some sides than others, and so it's a little more flexible. There's also a requirement that if you have a parking garage, back to this one, a parking garage fronting on a key pedestrian street
Right.
like Charlotte Street, you have to have an active use of 20 feet deep buffering that. So that's the modification as well that they're seeking. It's not technically the hotel parking deck, but it's parking that would be used by the hotel use. So
I think this is where that conversation around the interior bike lane came into play, because the Charlotte Street may never get a bike lane because of that, right? Or something came.
there was some constraints with the geometry and depth of the site with that parking garage, so there wasn't necessarily room to be able to do a robust streetscape and a street side retail use there. So that was kind of a trade-off, more or less.
Okay. That's why we like that bike internal and the conditions. Yeah. Go ahead.
Are we ready to hear from the?
Unless Kim has something, I don't
She,
know.
she wants to say something after the developer
Okay.
speaks. Okay. I don't. Yes, we're ready for this part.
Good evening. There's 4 of us to speak.
Okay.
It's a complex project. It has a lot of layers. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for your willingness to look through this and try to help understand it with us. But it does require, each of us have a different role. And so it might be a little bit unorthodox, but 4 of us will make some introductory comments. Mine will be the easiest. I'm going to introduce the group, and I will step back and be available for questions because I know you'll have questions. My name is Steve Navarro, for the record. My company is the Furman Company. We are developers, and we are based in downtown Greenville, South Carolina. We've spent the last almost 3 years here in Asheville working with a number of folks, starting with a large group of people just trying to get a better feel for what and how best this site can be used. It all started with our relationship with the YMCA. Paul Vest, Chairman and CEO, President and CEO of the Greater Western Carolina, North Carolina YMCA. Mr. Mac Dennis, Senior Pastor with First Baptist Church of Asheville, and then my partner, Robert Poppleton. So we're here to answer questions. Robert's going to make a little bit more in-depth comments, speaking a little bit also to some of your comments, and then I think our community partners want to speak as well.
Just 1 second while I bring this up. Thank you. Thank you for your time and creating this space for us this evening. Will, thank you for your comments. Thank you for summarizing our project well. We stand before you tonight seeking your approval on our conditional zoning application for Project Aspire. Project Aspire was born from the joint vision of First Baptist Church of Asheville and the YMCA of Greater Western Carolina. Inspired by their dedication to serving the community, they seek to enhance their missional engagement through an ambitious mixed-use and mixed-income development project. You'll hear more from them, so I won't elaborate too much on that. Controlling roughly 10 acres in the heart of this community at the eastern gateway of the CBD, these mission-driven organizations aim to transform their surroundings through this project, positioning themselves for a positive and sustainable community impact, serving this community for many generations to come. As Steve mentioned, we have been working for the past 3 years. We've been dedicated to this process that began with a discovery period, gave way to a community engagement phase, and most recently in the last 9 months has been going through a public review. And I would like to take a moment just to recap on some of what the ground that we covered during that time. Our discovery phase began with our mission partners, the sponsors of this project, the Y and the church. We spent a lot of time understanding their desires, their vision, their shared vision. We also immersed ourselves into the planning documents of this city, spending a lot of time with Living Asheville, and we were pleased to learn how aligned our vision and mission for the project was with this city's outlook and plan. At the heart of this effort is an unwavering commitment to uphold both the historic legacy of First Baptist Church of Asheville, as well as preserving and expanding their programmatic outreach, as well as the YMCA into a new state-of-the-art facility, all while doing something that is bold and hopefully other cities will come to model after in terms of their contributions beyond their mission. That is namely to affordable housing, affordable workspaces, and vibrant downtowns in place of where parking lots stand today. As we moved forward after the discovery period, we began our mission, our community outreach unofficially. We spent a year working with individuals, leaders, listening, learning, hearing, and reacting to the comments and feedback we received. This included over 20 community organizations. All of that concluded last fall before we put together our application for conditional zoning, which we submitted in December of last year, which has led to this process. We've been encouraged and busy along the way, reacting to the feedback that we have received from the various committees and boards in this process. We are happy to receive the unanimous support of these boards and are now pleased to share with you this vision and ask for your support tonight. I want to emphasize that Project Aspire is not just a development, it is a testament to the power of mission-led partnership, community engagement, and shared vision. It is the embodiment of the values held dear to First Baptist Church of Asheville and the YMCA, and we are privileged to be a developer to facilitate that vision. We hope to participate and create this legacy that will benefit Asheville for generations. We're ready to move forward with your support. We are ready to engage in conversation tonight as well, and we thank you for the time and effort that you've spent with us prior to this evening, and we pledge ourselves to continue an ongoing dialogue moving forward. With that, I will turn to Paul and Pastor Mac, for some additional comments. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Robert Poppleton. As Steve mentioned, I work with Steve and have been with a firm and company for about a decade, living in Greenville. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, staff. Thank you for indulging us in this transformational project. As we have talked to folks throughout the community, we kind of get that look about, what? You're talking about redeveloping 10 acres in Asheville? And as we talk about this, it really kind of always comes back to how it got started. And so as I thought about my comments tonight, I wanted to think back a little historically about both our organization, I'm sure Mac will do the same, but then also talk about how we got here as a historical institution in the community. We were founded in 1889 in this community, so we've been around for 134 years. We are probably one of the oldest nonprofits right now in the city of Asheville, and we take a lot of pride in that. We have not been perfect over that time, but we certainly have been an organization and institution that's constantly looking at ways that we can better serve the community. We've been in our current facility for 54 years. Those of you who have visited probably can see that. We've done about 3 or 4 major renovations since the mid-'80s. Our building is in need of huge renovation and updating so that we can serve the community for another 54 years in downtown Asheville. We've always been a leader in youth work in our community, and our history shows that going back to the Knothole Gang, which is a club that served kids during the Great Depression, and the Clean Life Club, which was also a program that served kids whose life was impacted by the Depression. We became the leader in after-school childcare when it wasn't really a thing to be doing, but we started recognizing, in this case, more moms were going back to work, and we needed to step up and provide an environment that's safe for children. We're now the largest provider of licensed school-age childcare in the state of North Carolina. We serve over 1,000 kids a day, and are making great impacts in the families that we're serving. We've had a history of great teamwork, our youth sports program, and then our aquatics program that's always been about teaching swim lessons, but more importantly, in the more recent years, working with some of the underserved communities around safety around water and the importance of making sure that we keep kids safe and they're not drowning. More recently, we ventured out into certainly we have a history of day camping, but overnight camping when we opened Camp Wataya in Swain County. And again, that was part of a real interest in making sure that our local kids had access to an overnight camp experience, many of which culturally would never have access to that through some of the other programs that we had here, or we have in Western North Carolina. Community health and health equity has really been a big piece of our work over the last number of years. We were one of the first YMCAs, but I think institutions in our community to start the mobile food markets. You've probably seen our trucks around town that really do reach out and make sure some of our underserved communities are getting fresh fruits and vegetables. Our community health programs include our diabetes prevention work and our minority diabetes prevention work that really cannot happen. Our Live Strong program, our cancer survivorship program, it cannot happen currently in our downtown location because of age in our facility and the makeup of that building. Our Health Opportunities Pilot, which we're very proud of, it's a partnership with Impact Health and our North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, is currently providing over 100 boxes of food to folks on Medicaid that we're delivering directly to their homes. Part of that work goes to MANNA, if they're still here, some of the work that we've partnered with them and the work that happens with that. We host the Mexican consulate twice a year. We currently have about 1,600 visitors who come through our doors for those services. We're providing over 400 diabetes screening programs. Those are all happening at our Reuter Y because we can't host that downtown because of our current facility. And then probably more recently, that's on top of most people's minds, during COVID, we were the first to respond for child care services for families who needed child care during that time, the essential workers, and served as a downtown vaccination location for our older African American population on 2 occasions where we were able to open our doors and serve that community. And then probably one you may not want to rehash, but the water crisis that we had last past December, we were proud to be able to step in and support the city and support some of the families that needed water and showers during that time. I say all that as just a quick backdrop to who we are as an institution that has been in this community for a long time, but I need to point out that I've been in this community now 27 years. It's a real privilege to be able to work with an incredible board of directors who've challenged our staff and our organization to be that that organization that is innovative in its thinking and thinking outside the box and figuring out how to do address community needs. In the past year, we started our strategic plan, and this work became part of that important work as we talked to a lot of folks in the communities, getting feedback and understanding and hearing the surprise when we start talking about what it would take to redevelop a brand new YMCA downtown. And our board committed through that process to serve the downtown community. It would have been very easy for us early on in some of these discussions to talk about vacating downtown, selling our property and going someplace else. And there was a real commitment on behalf of our board to say, no, we need to be downtown and start doing a better job of serving the community. So on this project specifically, 5 years ago, we started conversations with the church. And it took 2 years for us to be in dialogue with each other, really to talk about common vision, common values, what was in our hearts as an organization to really serve the downtown community. And both of the church and the Y at the time really found a common thread through all that. And it took us, again, 2 years to work through that process before we even started thinking about talking to a developer. It wasn't until we really started recognizing that there was huge potential because of the 10 acres that we shared and doing some work with a firm from the YMCA of the USA to really start mapping some of that out that we decided to start talking to developers. Furman came first and foremost because of their real commitment, as Robert mentioned, the common value that we have in serving the community in different ways and taking on challenging projects. I'm not sure you understood what a challenging project was until you started working on this one, but we were great. We became really good partners coming into this. So for those first 2 years, we really looked at community services from the YMCA and First Baptist Church and what we could do collectively together, as well as increase. Housing and childcare became 2 primary focuses. The business incubator space became one of those things that we could just continue to dream to figure out how do we do things in a way that the community can support and be part of this that brings buy-in from the entire community and not just the city, not just the county, and just not the two institutions. And then how do we build and reimagine a community for our local population? We heard a lot about the fact that our local folks don't want to come downtown. And so this really rang our bell a little bit on how do we create an environment in this part of town to invite people to come and enjoy food trucks and music and the YMCA and church services or music services out of the church. And this, again, part of two words that came up quite a bit was audacious and transformational. And who else but the YMCA and the church together could do something of this size? Firm and engaged our values in the community, our commitment to develop, brought the idea and the concept, and as we talked over 2 years with each other, the church and the Y, we didn't even think about the Asheville Living Plan. And it was Furman that brought that concept to the table and leveraging that idea that this could be so much more than even we were dreaming about. And then finally, and probably first and foremost, that I don't think we spend enough time talking about as an organization or even as a project, but we have the opportunity to really leverage community support for something that shouldn't just fall and can't just fall on the backs of the YMCA and First Baptist Church or Furman Development. We need to look at this as a real opportunity for a public-private philanthropic opportunity where we can go out and generate charitable contributions to support this project, whether it's supporting the Y Capital Campaign or it's supporting the efforts to bring affordable housing to the table or workforce or a work environment that can be subsidized to help with those first-time business owners. So with that, I want to thank you in advance. Again, I know there's been a lot of work that's been done with staff, and we appreciate their patience, but I appreciate your consideration for this and hopefully support as we continue to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of the heroes in my life is an African woman named Maggie Berenkitse. She's the Catholic founder of the original Maison Shalom in Burundi. Maggie carries the deep scars of violence, having borne witness to things almost too awful to imagine. After saving multiple children from one attack in her village and narrowly escaping death herself, she ended up adopting 7 of those children and ended up with hundreds more. Maison Shalom started as a refuge for orphans. It rose out of deep violence done to a community and to a neighborhood. And it would become a thriving complex of schools, hospitals, job training sites, and even a swimming pool that served as a symbol of baptism in a former killing field. Years later, Maggie was asked what gave her the strength to see her vision through, and she replied, "Love has made me an inventor." Honorable Mayor Mannheimer, Vice Mayor Kilgore, Councilwomen, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I stand before you tonight on behalf of First Baptist Church of Asheville and Project Aspire as a disciple of this woman. I believe you may be her disciples too. I have seen you at work, and I can say with conviction that I believe love has made each one of you an inventor. Were you to cross the threshold of our campus or sanctuary, what you will find is a constellation of ministries and missions that build up our city and give life to the words of our mission, beautiful belonging. Across the week, we care for over 60 children from all economic backgrounds in our Child Development Center. We teach nearly 300 children of all backgrounds to sing or play musical instruments in the Academy for the Arts. This weekend, we will host the first of 6 concerts by the Asheville Symphony Orchestra, who appealed to us for space after Thomas Wolfe went offline. We're attempting to reinstitute the Asheville Youth Choirs, a racially and socially diverse set of choirs that, before the pandemic, sang in congregations and events for all races and many faiths, and also represented Asheville by singing the national anthem at a Braves game in 2019. On Thursdays, you will find our gym full of local neighbors, many of whom are unhoused or in need of warmth, food, and friendship. They can count on finding these treasures at our church, and we count on them to come because we don't know how to be church without them. Come on any day of the week, and you will find civic and government groups, support groups, educational, and other nonprofit organizations enjoying our facilities at little or no cost. Come on Sundays and you will find worship that is uplifting and life-giving. We pray and sing from the heart. Our calling at First Baptist is not to judge, but to invite and to bless. Come to Pride Fest at the end of September and you will find our popular booth staffed with members excited to share God's love with people who were surprised we're there. People who've been taught that God doesn't love them. Come in October to join our Peacemakers team on a pilgrimage to Montgomery, Alabama, to the Legacy Museum and National Memorial for Peace and Justice. This same team has guided our members to join Hood Huggers tours and hosted a tour of the former lynching sites in Buncombe County this spring. This same team is guiding a congregational book study of the 1619 Project this fall. Some people can ban books, but they can't ban us from reading them. Come with me back in time to 1865, 1866, and you will see a church that is doing something that embarrasses us today, making our congregation untenable for the black members. They left and started their own church, Nazareth First Baptist Church. Fast forward 50 years and you will find our congregations beginning to repair those breaches. Come with me back in time to 1968 and you will find a church full for Asheville's memorial service for Martin Luther King Jr. You would also find our pastor at the time, Cecil Sherman, marching in the downtown silent parade in King's memory. Come with me back to June 2020 and you will find our church along with members of Hopkins Chapel praying together in our parking lot full of luminaries in memory of George Floyd. My church still has much to learn about ourselves and our city. Together with the YMCA and Furman, we also feel we feel called to preserve and share so much with our city. Love has made us inventors, but we can't invent what's next on our own. What we've imagined now, we can only do well with our whole community. I believe we can do together what Maggie Barron-Keatsey did with Maison Shalom. We can do this work together in ways that can help break down social barriers that have kept us apart. We cannot fix the violence that black people have endured here, but black and white people can cooperate to do something beautiful now. Honorable Mrs. Mosley, your father, the Reverend Charles Mosley, and my spiritual forefather were friends. I believe they would be proud of us today just for beginning the conversation. I believe they'd be eager to encourage us to do together whatever we cannot do apart. I believe they would speak words of comfort to us when we hit snags and difficult conversations. I'm grateful for you, for your neighborhood, and for the leaders there like Renee White. My new friend, who are the real Maggie Barron-Keatseys of Asheville. Love has made you inventors and prime movers. I don't know what it's like to go through what black people have gone through in Asheville. I was present at a Hood Huggers tour when Dwayne Barton preached from the embankment that overlooks the building we're in right now and spoke eloquently of the pain that he and his community have endured for generations. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be standing outside of Stevens Lee High School when white people and bulldozers came and destroyed it. I don't know what it's like to have lived through what you've lived through and to endure even now the legacies of racism and the violence done to your neighborhood and to your people. But I know my heart, and I know the heart of my congregation and the heart of the YMCA and the hearts of the developers at Furman, who in fact were catalysts for the conversations that the congregation and the Y commenced. And I know that the character of the people that have given rise to this concept is genuine. At the end of Scripture, of the Bible, which is the story that has given shape to my life, the end and telos, the consummation of that vision and dream, I'm glad to say, is not a church. Rather, it's a city of beautiful belonging. And there are no gates there, and the threshold is open. And across the threshold, the kings of the earth, or rather the leaders of the earth, bring their glory and their treasures. And so do all the people. Coming to and from the city, they make it thrive by their gifts. So tonight, I invite you to imagine what treasures and gifts you can bring to this dream, as we ourselves imagine what treasures and dreams and gifts we can bring to it. I invite you and all the city of Asheville to catch a glimpse of this dream that could transform our city for the better and bring people who might never have imagined crossing onto our property to come there and experience beautiful belonging. Let love make of each one of us an inventor, and we shall do something together that will make the ears of all who hear of it tingle. Thank you.
It's Rosh Hashanah this weekend, so I feel like you're getting me ready for a good sermon.
We're closing.
Okay. Oh, you're the closer.
Yeah.
But
I know
and
you have one.
then we want to get into some
Questions?
I just want
just
to say thank you for receiving us and for being open-minded in this. I started with saying this is a very complex project. It's also a unique project. When you look at the sponsors and the partners in this project, being the church and the YMCA, vested community members that I'm sure there's going to be plenty of public comment, people supporting and people not supportive. Please keep in mind that this is not a developer-driven project, that this project is so unique. It has community benefactors that want to see this through. And this is an opportunity that we hope that you'll grasp. And that's why we're asking you for approval of this phase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait,
whoever our deciders would be helpful for us. So I think we this has been a long process, and then as per usual, and even worse than normal because this is so complicated and big, we have kind of a last hurry scurry piece to this. So this is a conditional zoning application, which means this is council's opportunity to talk about the zoning and entitlements for the property. And as a part of that, we normally set conditions that are attached to each project. And in this case, that has already been prepared and presented, but there's been a lot of discussion even leading up till this afternoon about some of those conditions. And I think there's also some questions about the project itself. It has evolved, if that's the right word, I would, as it's moved through the process, and some aspects of it have changed. So I don't know who wants to start. Do you want to start with question, however you want to do it? But
maybe answers to the first round of questions. Yeah. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that's fine.
So first I want to start off by saying, I want to address Reverend Mack. From the moment Mr. Wilcox introduced us, I have had a great affinity for you, and the affinity that I have for First Baptist for my family has gone back generations. And I can attest that everything you said is in fact true. Another point I would like to make is a statement of gratitude that the developers and folks from the YMCA, as well as First Baptist, have taken the time to speak to and hear from, particularly the neighbors from the East End community. We have gotten so far. There is one spot, though, that I think where there is disagreement. So in matters like this, when we're asked to decide whether we're going to
deal with a change in zoning, the first question we have to ask is the request reasonable? I believe the majority of the proposals here are reasonable, but I do not believe that two structures, one 19 stories and 20 stories, is reasonable, in that buildings of that height are disproportionate to the aesthetic and character of the community. I won't speak for East End at this time because I'm seeing several members here, but it is my belief that the height is a sticking point for them. So my question to you is, my request is that you consider, instead of 19 and 20, a 15-story maximum. And I've checked, and according to our city ordinance, that change would be permissible. So I'll ask you that directly.
Thank you for your comments and your question. There are several ways to address that, and I'll speak in reference back to our process and what led again to this plan. Part of our early study and discovery was to understand the existing zoning, the existing code that governs these 10 acres. And we allowed that to be a guide for the rest of the form you now see in this master plan. So we understand through the current zoning that the height of these buildings is consistent with what is laid out, outlined in the existing code. So recognizing that, and then also we spent time with understanding what the community went through in the years before our pursuit of this conditional zoning and the hotel overlay, and identified where we placed the hotel in this master plan is one of the few remaining sites in downtown Asheville that we recognize the community went through a process to arrive at, which is also reflected in where we placed this hotel, consistent with the height zone that it is in. That is one more technical reasoning for the placement and the sizing of that hotel. The other one is it truly is the economic facilitator for all the other missional components of this project. It is not possible to achieve what we are seeking to achieve with our sponsors in the Church and the Y and the contribution of up to 130 additional affordable house, deed-restricted affordable housing units, and to be able to go after some of the other missional objectives that both Paul and Pastor Mack spoke to. So, in short, we are not able to reduce the height at this. We're not able to reduce the height as part of this conditional zoning request because of what it represents and the feasibility of the rest of the project.
Would you like to have follow-up?
No, I don't need to follow up.
Can you address some of the questions that we asked previous to the presentations?
Can you
Sure.
reiterate those, please?
Yeah. Okay. They were conditions, and I think you and I spoke today. I spoke with your team last week and just a couple times, but unfortunately just really recently. I wish that we had had more time. And I do think that a delay tonight would have helped solidify some of this, but I'll try. So some of the requests I've made were, I mean, if we're going to speak in philosophy, I'll say that when we went through this hotel moratorium and described this process, the goal was to create a clear process for hotels that left, less of this risk to the developer, which you're speaking of, right? Seeking entitlement to be able to fund and build the project. But it came with a clear set of rules, including this community benefits table and so on. And I believe the intent when we did that was kind of setting a minimum of what we would say we expect from a hotel application. So when you go above that, I'm still thinking in my mind that you're going to be submitting this community benefits table and meeting all these requirements, but I understand you're not. So my first question is, are you going to be able to score yourself on a community benefits table like we talked about today and be able to commit to, if you are not able to produce the housing, to follow back on some of these suggested uses of the community benefits table? Do you want me to do these one at a time? Would you like to speak to that one?
I think we can
Sure.
address them as they, we'll
Okay.
maybe one as they come.
Okay.
Yes, we understand the way that the hotel moratorium and now the hotel overlay functions, specifically for hotels of a certain size. And for hotels outside of that range, well, hotels within that range do not have to go before council if they meet those benefits.
Right.
We have taken this more holistically, more comprehensively, instead of having a deconstructive approach to maybe do 5, 6, or 7 different developments and come for, well, actually all of them are supported by existing zoning, but instead of handling them individually, we have taken them as a whole. So within that process, yes, we've looked initially at, okay, let's consider how we would score, given that our intent is to follow how the community has planned this site. If this project was alone, it would score very well on that table, but I think the most significant contributor that this project, this hotel, is the catalyst for is instead of writing a check to either $3,000 or $6,000 per unit per key of the hotel to support affordable housing and other initiatives, we are contributing close between $20 to $30 million in direct investment in affordable housing through the up to 130 units that are outlined in this master plan.
So to be clear, you're not, so just, sir, very clear, you are not committing to what we spoke today on the phone about?
Regarding if we do not
If you do not produce the
fulfill-
housing, because of the phasing of this, let me just back up, because I know it's going to be confusing, there's a lot of pieces, but because of the phasing, you're proposing that the first phase will have 100 or so units, but the second phase is going to be the tax credit application and perhaps the largest piece of affordability. My concern, and for the sake of the community over these next 10 years of developing this, if the first phase is all that you get past, what is the, then you're a hotel with the Y and a big parking deck, and now it sounds like you are not going to activate the hotel bottom floor like we also had talked about. But, so I want to make sure that, are you committing to these things or not? Are you saying, no, we're not going to do this because we believe our future contribution to affordability meets more than that community benefits table? Or are you saying what I thought we said earlier, which is I will agree to fall back on this should we not be able to produce the affordable housing?
It's a little bit difficult for us to respond to we're going to respond to your questions, but it's a little bit difficult to us to respond to questions when we're sort of one strike against us, because Will responded in some ways that he didn't actually know the full answers.
Okay.
And so it
Fair
would have been
enough.
helpful if some of the questions that you had posed, we were here to be able to respond to at that time. The hotel, we are activating the hotel. On
The
ground-
bottom
On
floor,
the ground floor.
but with a lobby or a public restaurant or?
Restaurant, bar, outdoor, indoor seating, multiple ways in and out. What we're not doing, and what we had said we wouldn't do, or what we're not planning on doing, was leasing that space to some other retailer, but that the hotel would commit to activating that area. So the answer to that is yes, we will activate that. The rest of the project, as you turn the corner and go up Oak Street, where we have, in this one, it's color-coded yellow, with the housing on top. At the base of that, if we had a three-dimensional on there, we could show you that we're committing to activate all retail. As you turn the corner of the green is the YMCA, that'll all be activated with the YMCA. So the answer, we think, is yes, we are activating it with the hotel use, with retail leases on Oak Street, and with the YMCA. As far as the community benefits, it's an awkward question for us. Here's why it's awkward, and we may be seeing it wrong. When the city put a moratorium on hotels and then came back and said, here's how we're going to do this. These are the areas we accept large-scale hotels. These are the areas we will not. These developers, if they're at a certain amount and less, because it's a small project and it can't be all-encompassing, we're going to create this community benefits table, and you need to pay in because you're taking more out. You're taking more out of the community than you're putting in by putting this hotel in there, and you're not doing anything else. So, bill at leads, help with structured parking, write a check for housing. Larger projects then must come before city council. And then you have your opportunity then to talk with us about, okay, what are you doing for the community and how are you mitigating the impact of that hotel? In our case, because this is a mixed-use project and we're bringing the hotel, the YMCA, retail office, and parking just in phase one all together at one time, so you can see the breadth and scope of all of that project and feel good about it, because we want you to feel good about it. We've committed to building housing, and we've committed to building affordable housing, approximately 20% of 150 units, which is 30, at about $250,000 apiece is a $7.5 million investment into the community for affordable housing. Will there be subsidies? We're hoping so. We're going to look for subsidies from multiple, but it's not going to cover $7.5 million worth of units. So the alternative would be to write a check for the community benefits at, I believe, $6,000 a unit, maybe $1.5 million, somewhere in that range. We would write, and you would put that into your housing, and we wouldn't build any housing. So that's why it's an awkward question for us, because these types of larger projects are designed to come before you to look at more holistically, look at all-encompassing, and we're doing that, but it feels a little bit, honestly, a little bit unfair than for you to then say, okay, well, that's what you're doing, let's negotiate that, and then let's score it on the community benefits, and then let's see where you're short, because we're really not short. If we score it, we're at like 200 of 220 points. Just from
That's what I understood from our talk today, that you were close and that you would be able to express that you actually did look at this community benefits table and an ode to our process, but that you were close and that this shift of saying, should we not be able to produce them, we will go back and look at these other options. You're talking about the contribution part, there are many on there, but that you would do that instead. And that's a safety net for us over a multi-phase project.
If you put in conditions in the event you don't build affordable housing in phase one.
That's what I'm asking.
You've got to break up the difference? Absolutely. That's an easy yes, because it's logical and that's fair.
Okay, so that was my question. That was one of them.
So did we get to
I think that I heard them say they will do that. Brad, do you need to clarify legal language there?
I think we've got it. No.
Okay. And then the ground floor activation, you're saying where we see building 2 in purple, the hotel, that will not be activated, but when you turn the corner on Oak Street, on the left side here, that will be activated?
We're saying the hotel will be activated with hotel-sponsored uses.
Just on the purple front there?
On College.
College, right. And then when you turn onto Oak Street, there will actually be retail?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. What about the bike lane? I don't see it anywhere, and I thought, and Kim may end up speaking to this because I know it was of importance to her, but my understanding was it was a connecting issue, and bike lanes are kind of a hot topic in this community. Are you committing to it or not?
So where would it go? It would go.
I'd have to see the.
The planning and zoning, the mobility transportation committee. I mean, everybody we met with wanted to talk about this, and it's important. So they came up with a plan that had cycle tracks and bike lanes around the perimeter of the property so that it's easily accessible. In addition to that, and I think this might be what you're talking about, if you look on the upper right-hand corner where 240 comes down the off-ramp and turns right onto Charlotte Street.
Yes.
See the white, what looks like a white road?
Yeah.
That is closed and fenced off right now. And so one of the things we talked about, and one of the things the church committed to doing, was to open that up and create a pedestrian pathway so that you don't have to come all the way down to College Street and make the corner, that now you can cut in and come right into the project through and onto Pack Square.
On foot, not on bike. So no bike lane.
And bike.
Okay.
Foot bike. Yes.
Bike ped is what we call it.
Yes.
We're
all bikers. We're all cyclists, so.
Please address the concern around voucher acceptance in all housing phases.
So yes, there's an update from how Will presented the conditions that were summarized through the P&Z process. We have and are willing to accept vouchers on 50% of all affordable units within this project.
First and second phase.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that needs to be added to the project conditions.
Right. And then did you hear us talking about the short-term rental language, which is more of a duplicative language piece, but are you okay with that?
Yeah, that one, and what was the other one, the gated community? We will agree with the gated community.
Yeah.
Even though it's against your ordinance anyways.
Right.
It's already something, so that's an easy one.
Okay.
The short-term rental is a little bit more complicated, and here's why. We're not planning on doing short-term rentals, and we will commit to not do short-term rentals.
And we prohibit them.
So long as they're prohibited. But here's why we have to put that caveat in there. 20 years ago, if I had said we're going to do all short-term rentals, you would have said okay, because nobody knew what they were.
Right.
Today, they're a real challenge. 20 years from now, and your predecessors 7 generations from now might have a complete definition, different definition of what an STR is. And in fact, there may be no hotels 60 years
It's
ago.
probably a moot point, because if the legislation passes as it's proposed, and just everyone who's sitting out there, the legislature's considering passing a prohibition on local government from regulating short-term rentals. So if they were to do that, it would probably void any restriction in these conditions.
What would that?
This is where you chime in and agree with me. But so, I mean, we put it in as a condition.
That we would not, that they would not have STRs. But then later, should the legislators change their minds, I understand that bill will not be in front of them this year, and that it may be waning entirely.
Hopefully.
So it's all opinion and speculation at this point. But you're saying you're not willing to commit to not
Forever.
allowing STRs?
We're not willing to commit to forever.
I think what I hear you saying is, if you're no longer allowed to prohibit them, then.
So Brad, how does that work? If the state were to come in and say, government, you can't do anything, but because they went through a CZ process with a condition, they would still be required to do it?
It would depend
Or
on the
would it
specific
override?
wording of the legislation. This shifts. We have multiple bills floated year to year on this. There's one that's currently pending that would be fairly expansive and comprehensive in terms of removing the power of local governments to set those regulations. My sense is that the mayor is correct in that a change along the lines of what we've seen of proposed legislative initiatives would essentially void these kind of conditions, because essentially it would strip our ability to regulate, and therefore our ability to file notice of violations on existing zoning conditions if they were violated. So I do think
So we should be able to add it, and you should be able to trust that we can add it.
My suggestion would be that we include it. It is already restricted at this particular location completely from whole home rental, but you can add short-term rental unless otherwise prohibited by state law.
There we go. So how about that language?
We'll take that.
Okay, and just to be clear, if you're following along, when these conditional zonings come to us, we have to agree. Like, we have to agree on the things on that list, so that's why we're kind of talking. It's less negotiating, more conversing. Maggie or Kim may want to speak to the bike lane, but I think that satiates my list of condition things. I do want to say I truly wish that this hotel was actually a large housing project. I understand the complexity. This is a very complex project. I'm actually quite impressed that you were able to pull together all of the parcels and involved parties. So I just have some concerns about the process and getting the conditions in place, because you are asking us for such a lofty approval on what is essentially a massing study. And so just, all due respect, I just feel like the community itself with this larger project, the largest we've seen in downtown, and what could become the tallest hotel, just needs a little more scrutiny ahead of time. So
We hear you. Thank you.
Tallest building, yep. And I'm hoping, if you guys aren't able to speak to the bike lane, I'll come back to it, but I think one of you might.
I mean, that wasn't a concern of mine.
Okay.
Yeah, because in the multimodal conversation, that one didn't really rise to the top. The concern that I was mentioning earlier around parking spaces, can we reduce that maximum to 1,700? Like, what would it take to do that? Just for context, currently in our entire downtown, the municipal parking spaces that we have is around 2,000 in our decks. This is an enormous portion of the space of our community being planned towards that. And then Interior B has on-street parking as well, which is something that we've talked about already. I know this is in a Project Aspire. I don't find on-street parking, like there's some of the transportation design of this that seems very business as usual for anticipating that cars are at the center of this. And I just would love to hear where there's wiggle room on that.
Sure. Genesis of parking here. We started with Living Asheville. And Living Asheville said, we aspire to have all of our parking on the outer sides of the CBD and let people basically park in central nodes and walk in. This is an outer gateway to downtown. So if there is excess parking, we would expect over time, over years, people will want to park there and walk into, as you further restrict or as you change or as you grow inside the CBD, because we're on the perimeter of that. So that was a bit where we started. Secondly, if you add up, and the mayor has left for a moment, but she's very correct on that, each of these are individually owned projects. If you add up the requirement for parking on each of them from a standalone, they equate to about, I don't remember if it's 1,800 or 2,000 spaces. If we have joint parking agreements, reciprocal parking agreements is legally what they're called, then we can argue, or we can make the case that there is shared uses, and we can cut 10, 20, depending upon types of uses, 30% of those, and basically get the economies of scale for that. But if you just do each of these on their own, it's as much or more than what we've actually put forward.
And when you say requirements,
Requirements.
whose requirements?
If I want to build a housing project, and I build 150 units, and it costs $30 million, and I put $10 million in, and I go to the bank and borrow $20 million. One of the first things they're gonna do is look at the project and look at its viability, and they're gonna say, well, where are they gonna park? And if we can't answer that question, we won't get a loan. And that's true for all the way through. In phase 2, building 3, you see 2 buildings. That could be 2 buildings, it might be 1 building. We're trying desperately to hold that out for office, Class A office. One of the things we heard when we came to downtown was a real need for large office spaces, not a lot of office space in a lot of areas, but large blocks of office to be able to attract corporate headquarters and create jobs. Same thing for that, but that requirement is somewhere in the 3, used to be in the 4 to 5 per thousand range. Code used to be 5 per thousand on the ground floor, 3 per thousand above, typical standard code for lenders. Now it's more like 3. So if we build 200,000 square feet there, we have to show where we're gonna park 600 people, or we won't get financing. So that's how all of that worked out. 2,000 is on the upper end. We will not, nobody wants to build 2,000 parking spaces at $35,000 pop. They're super expensive. So if we can do less, we will do less, because somebody has to pay for those.
I understand that, and I mean,
There are some conditions the NCHFA asked. The LIHTC project itself has a list of requirements, one of which is a parking ratio. And I've told this to at least Robert today, but in the past, as the housing chair, I think myself and Brownie and possibly Esther have all signed letters of support with the application to the NCHFA saying, in our downtown, we have a 0 space requirement. Would you please allow a lower ratio for this applicant? And they were able to get it. So, and that was a 0.75 instead of a 1.5. So I think what I'm hearing is if you can shrink the parking and shrink the cost, that would be good for everyone.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, this is win-win for everybody. We're doing that for safety, to be able to make the project financially viable. We don't want to build these parking spaces.
I hear that, and I think some of the tension I'm experiencing in this process is that I want this housing downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I want a future that has this space activated. I want to go work out at the Y there. I want all these community partners to be taking their vision and carrying it into like building vibrancy and homes for people. I want this. And we have one chance as community's elected officials to put in some controls through this CZ. And I understand the ambition of the scale of this project makes it really hard to answer a lot of specific projects. But if you can sense the anxiety in the room, it's that we're asked by the public to be this check and balance, this barrier, and a range of 165 to 300 guest rooms, a max. Like, I understand why you're seeking the CZ for the flexibility for you to then negotiate with different projects. This is just really outside of the norm of how we have these conversations. And so it's hard for me to feel with confidence I even hear you saying like, well, of course you don't want to build extra parking. That's very expensive for you to pull off this project. But you're asking us to approve I don't know, there's a best case and a worst case, and we get to weigh in now, and we're giving a lot of allowances in case the worst case needs to pan out, and it's hard. So I just want to share that perspective so you understand some of the wrestling that I think you're hearing right now, or the wrestling I'm experiencing in this. I want this vision. I love the community leaders who have come to the table to say, like, let's be part of a redevelopment that makes our community healthier. I hear a lot of the vision, and I just wish there was a lot more detail, and I understand that's hard for us to do in this process, but anyway, I'm being redundant.
Well, but
I'm
your
struggling
point-
with that. It's hard.
It is, and I do want to say, in a note of like support, I agree, I want this project to happen. My concern is that there's a lot of asks before us that are complicated that we can't have future input on, and it's not our normal process. It's not anywhere near our normal process, frankly. And it is not lost on me that we have approved several very large projects, other 15, 16, 17-story buildings, and they are not built. They are entitled and they are not built, and they may not ever be built. So I can understand the rationale of the lodging use as an effort to subsidize some of these efforts that on their own are not necessarily getting built. So I'm trying to rationalize, and I am trying to ensure that the community gets the benefits that they express to us through the 3-year moratorium, please don't build any more hotels in our city process, right? And that's how it went down. And it went down in front of all of us, so it's very fresh on our brain. So just perspective on some of this in the air, but.
We appreciate that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Okay. So, sorry, I had to step out for a second. So we don't have resolution on the parking. Does, and Kim wanted to make a comment. And so I have a question, this isn't a question for you guys. Let me just make sure we don't have any other items that need to be dealt with in terms of conditions. I want to answer your question, but.
I just did, yeah.
Well, okay. So this is a really important project, and if there's not council support for it tonight, because you need more time, you need to say that, and the applicant will continue this to another date. If a project is voted down, then it cannot come back to council for a year. So
Or without substantial changes. We did see that with the Avery.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
but our intent here is not to make this the most arduous process
Right.
ever. If there are some questions that need to be resolved and can be resolved tonight, then we should work to do that. If that's not possible, then it's not possible. So, that's how the process works. So are we done talking about, sorry?
One thing I would like to say is I am very supportive of the project. I realize that you gentlemen are visionaries and you are willing to actually something that you've already explored and thought about and brought the pieces together. So I can understand where you are a little bit more comfortable with the overall process. I really think that the project that you're doing represents our comprehensive plan on steroids. I think it gets us to a place where we all basically, said we wanted to go. And when we talk about, even if we get with the bicycle lanes and the bicycle, things that we're discussing now, it's not that people are against bicycle lanes. What we're against is not being able for the full plan of the city to accommodate that particular need. The increase in housing that we're seeing could actually reduce the amount of traffic because it could actually increase the use of other multimodal transportation. And this is where everybody was saying they wanted to go. And this is what your project does. And this is what a lot of the projects do. So I am definitely supportive, and I realize people have concerns. As far as the parking is concerned, I was just wondering, Can parking be readapted, say for instance spaces that you actually use for parking? Later on, if they're not in use, can there be, go ahead. Yes,
I'm happy to address
like
that.
you, yes.
Parking is the bane of our existence. We were hoping 10 years ago that we'd be in driverless cars by now, and we would not be thinking about parking garages. We're developing a corporate headquarters in downtown Grandview right now on the river for the largest bank domiciled in South Carolina. It's a 200,000 square foot facility. We're looking at parking and what we're going to do. We have 3 levels of parking in the garage, in the building. It's actually a Class A office building with 3 levels of parking. The cost to build, we looked at this and we said, this is not going to be parking forever. So how do we do this and use this space?
Yeah.
So we designed it to then also accommodate basically a speed ramp, 14-foot clear, and then we could reuse those another time. The cost was double.
Exactly.
The problem is the cost was double. It was like, our quote was like from $35,000 to $50-something thousand a space to do that. So we looked at that and said, no project can afford that today with costs where they are. So what ends up happening is you take a project like this, that gray that shows parking is built like this, and it's as efficient as possible so you can get up and down, and it's not taking all the property. It allows for the YMCA to be on that site because of that, but it's not adaptable.
They're both interior ramping
Yes, it's not adaptable.
by design, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I wish that they were, because we thought of that.
Yeah, okay, great.
Are you able to speak to whether or not there's any public parking projected to be available in any of this as you see it?
In our perfect world, we would like for the public to pay for the garage, and then we would pay you for user fees on an as-needed basis, and then when every space is not available, can be available for rent.
You just said you would like the public. You want the public to build the garage?
No, that means paid, like
You
our
said, is
public
there,
debts,
is
they
there,
pay.
so there are variations of
Yeah.
that, depending upon how it's being paid for, but certainly those spaces, we will want to activate and rent them to anybody that's using them, and whoever sponsors that garage, or whatever combination sponsors that garage, will want to be getting money from that, yes.
I just want to say, so that's like, I mean, you're setting up for what we believe is an upcoming phase of a private partnership project ask.
Absolutely.
On the deck, where we might actually be asked to help fund this deck.
Yes, so we'll be back, and a lot of the questions that you're asking today, we're gonna be talking about again. You're gonna have a vested interest in wanting to know more, and we get that. That's why we're trying to get through this phase so that we can then address that much more complicated.
What I'm hearing from Councilwoman Ullman is she's already alarmed by the number of spaces, so now we're also going to be asked to help pay for it. Just, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you speak to the condition I mentioned, what seems like an hour ago, with Easton? You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yes,
please?
absolutely. Thank you for bringing that back up. And maybe just a little more context. One of our, couple weeks ago, I think we were able to meet again with the East End Neighborhood Association, East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association, and arrived at several new ways that we can ensure a collaborative process going forward and explore various interests. And I believe there was some language that the city staff, city attorney proposed to include in our project conditions, and we are supportive of that language. So we would like to include that as part of this project's commitments. Thank you.
And we also thought that was a very beneficial meeting. We talked with East End about a year ago, and then we did not come back. The project didn't change very much, so we were busy doing other things, and we should have. And that was brought to our attention, which is why we continued last time. Had a great, and we met some wonderful people. One sitting here in the room, Ms. Kim, when we're done here, we're gonna hire her as our community spokesperson for all of our projects in the United States.
I think Councilwoman Roney has a question for you.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Our council rules don't allow me to vote while attending remotely, but I want to share my position for transparency and accountability, then pose questions. Through this process, I was contacted by a representative of the development team that asked me to consider this for a unanimous vote. When voting, we have two choices, yes or no. binary does not reflect the complex reality of issues our community faces or the path towards healing and repair we desire from the history of harmful, racist zoning practices. There's a tale of two Asheville's, one where outside investors and owning class neighbors benefit from our extractive tourism industry, and another where working poor, renters, and households vulnerable to gentrification are displaced by unchecked tourism, while our ecosystem and infrastructure are burdened. Regarding Project Aspire, I agree with the sentiment at our agenda briefing on Thursday that we're not yet ready to make this conditional zoning decision in order to assure success of this transformational project. More time is needed to address land use impact concerns identified by the adjacent East End Valley Street neighborhood. When the hotel overlay map passed in 2021, I did not vote to approve it because of concerns, including land use that surrounds some of our historic Black neighborhoods of East End Valley Street and Southside, at every entrance with lodging hotel use. We would not do that to other neighborhoods in the city. Another issue is that this project does not have to comply with the benefits table because it's too large. I'm grateful to hear community input tonight and remain hopeful that the development team that includes First Baptist Church and the YMCA can meet this moment to respond to concerns and find solutions. I appreciate the health and child care facilities. I appreciate the commitment to address the concern that this won't be a gated community. As proposed and as a precedent moving forward, I would not vote to approve the hotel use. So my question is the development team willing to pause and come back once neighborhood concerns are addressed?
I'm not sure. It sounded like if the concerns are addressed specifically, but I'm also interested to hear if the development team is interested in a delay to better shore up some of the concerns.
We're interested in getting this right. We're not interested in a delay, but we're interested in getting this right. But we think, and we're trying earnestly to address your concerns tonight. So I'm not sure what else could come about on that. I think the only thing that we have said with unfortunateness is that we cannot reduce the hotel. So if a delay is to talk about that, then I think Councilperson Roney's request, our answer is we would prefer to just move forward tonight.
So I understand there are a number of discussion points with the neighborhood that have gelled up aside from the height of the hotel. So I'm not sure if Councilwoman Roney is talking about the hotel height or if she's talking about these other items, but I may be mistaken about that. I think, as I understand it, there may be a desire to move this to the next meeting. Council, if we were to ask the developer to move this application for consideration to the next meeting, what do we want them to address between now and the next meeting that you don't have information about tonight that would help you make a decision about this project at the next meeting?
I mean, for one, just on a simple basis, a clear list of the actual conditions. Because in the last 48 hours, so many things have changed, and now we've just rattled off a list. Our attorney needs to write them, you need to agree. That, as a simple step in itself, would be helpful for me.
So we could take a break and have staff finalize that, but other things?
I mean, I still have lingering concerns around a few things, frankly. But I will let you all speak to that.
And I'm interested in knowing that we're not going to continue to move the goalpost after we have this conversation with them. So your concerns that are on the table, I think they answered your questions very honestly.
As best they
could. After, when we discuss that with them, I would appreciate it if we don't continue to add more on top of it.
So to that point, is it more that you just want more time for you to decide, or are there things that you would like the applicant to provide? I mean,
I think I have too many concerns to be supportive tonight. I may feel differently after I see this list from our attorney and shore up with all these concerns, but I think you all may have support without my support, so it may be moot. So perhaps move to my colleagues.
How about you, Councilman Ullman?
I think I need more time to decide.
So it's not that you want the applicant to give you more information, it's that you just kind of need to marinate over it.
I think that I've heard a lot of different things in the last couple of days. I think seeing them, reading them, processing them, just I mean, even in the last hour and a half, I'm still not sure if there's retail space in building 3. It's hard to keep track of some of it. And so,
Well, if you have questions, please ask them so they can answer.
So just ask them, is
Yeah.
there space?
I know, and I'm saying, I think I'd like some more time to decide. So I'd like the conversation we had today to get into writing so that we can review, because even from the staff report, which was excellent, which I did review ahead of time, there's been changes in this conversation. I would love to be able to auto-compute all that, but I just need some more time to process.
To
So
Councilwoman
one
Smith's point
concern I
too,
have-
this is why we did the hotel process, right? So we wouldn't change the goalpost on developers at the end. And that's what you're feeling. And I don't want that to happen either. But I think if this project, the largest project we've seen with the largest hotel we've seen, can be gelled for 2 weeks and come back to us where you have more people on this council feeling more comfortable with what you're requesting of us, that would probably be a better move, in my opinion. But
May I ask a procedural question? There's people here today, I'm sure, that are speaking, want to speak for and against the project. Is a continuance something that they'll all have to leave and come back?
Yes,
Or would
that's
we
what
hear
it would-
that
yes.
today and then not open that up?
can we not
next
have
time?
them make their public comment and then continue?
We have,
Or we have to have a motion in a second?
I think that I think we should do public comment one time, and if we're not voting on it tonight, we're gonna need to have our motion to continue, move it to the next agenda, and then folks will come back to speak on it when we're actually considering it. My only reservation, I'm a little disappointed that we're having to put it off because I'm not sure it will meaningfully change. But is that we will get a redraft of these conditions and there will be a bunch of, oh, that's not what I thought was gonna be on there. Oh, that's not how I thought that was gonna be worded. So is there a way, could we take a break while you're here, and can you Brad and Will get together and I don't know, it sounded like it was very close to incorporating the things that were discussed tonight. So could we do that to make sure it's captured like you, I'm talking about goalposts right now.
Right, and
So-
I'm more with Maggie. I do think this needs time to digest personally, but if we want to
This is
fly
Kim.
through
Can
a
I
list of,
make a suggestion that we please hear public engagement on this so that we don't miss an opportunity to mitigate concerns?
yeah, I guess procedurally.
I'm not okay. Normally if we're continuing an item, we continue it and we take public comment when we're voting on it. Because we're statutorily required to take public comment, so we would be doing it again at the next, whenever this comes back. And for all I know, it collapses and it doesn't come back. And so, I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen.
And I just want to say, the ask for more time is because I want this to work. I believe in this vision, and it's just gotten very muddied. And maybe that's my own, I need to see it and read it and process and digest it, but I'd rather delay it than vote no.
And I'd rather not spend 15 minutes hustling to write things down so that we hurry it tonight, but
No, I'm not saying that the list is done tonight. I just wanted, while they're here, because of the nature of a conditional zoning, which requires the agreement of both the applicant and the council, I just wanted to make sure, it's been so difficult to get everybody together to have this discussion. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about this list. I'm kind of looking at you, Sage, because a lot of the additions are suggestions you've made, which I'm supportive of. I think council's supportive of, but I don't want you to say, well, that doesn't capture what I was thinking.
I wouldn't know till I was written out and I got to sit with it, and maybe there might come more, I don't want to move goalposts. Frankly, I'm pro-development in downtown. I'm pro-housing in downtown. I'm pro-housing affordability. There are so many things I love, but I'm telling you, I don't feel good about this vote right now.
So this would be, is 2 weeks going to be enough, I guess is the question.
I'm willing to commit to not continue it again, to try and hammer this out between now and the next meeting and give you your answer.
So it'd be
26th.
September 26th, will that be acceptable?
I'm willing to commit to voting that night, yeah.
All right. Okay, so can we have a motion to move this?
Kim?
Yeah, people have been waiting 2.5 hours to speak, and I just wondered, could we have the 2 public comments? Like, how would this maybe be the end of the world? I would feel really,
It's 20.
I think it'd be unfortunate if we missed
It's
this
20
opportunity.
public
Are we legally allowed to have 2 engagements on this?
Kim, we have 20 people signed up. I'm sorry. We're gonna continue this to the next meeting and take public comment at that time.
And I'm sorry to the folks that have waited all of this time. I know that's not ideal.
Mayor, if I could just clarify one additional thing. There has been one, I believe I've got the list of conditions that we've discussed tonight, but there was one that was brought up that wasn't reached, that did not reach a final determination. And it was originally couched as the inclusion of a bike path. Now, there was discussion about an area which is reflected on this concept plan, which we've designated as a bike ped path, which is pedestrian and allows for bikes. And there was a request among council that a specific condition be included that the site plan include a bike ped path.
I'd like some clarity on that too. Where on the plan is there, we have a connectivity plan that was submitted with our project material,
Do you have it?
and I can't bring it up if maybe Will can, if he's here, but
And I don't know if we're just delaying the delay because it sounds like we're about to motion to continue.
I can clarify.
But it
Yeah.
would be, if Brad's struggling with how to
Yeah.
word it.
For Brad's sake, go ahead.
There is in the
Picture.
project conditions, the cycle track is enumerated, so I don't know if that's what you're referring to, the Charlotte Street and College Street cycle track, that is in the project
I'll
conditions.
tell you where my opinion on this came from, because it's actually wasn't my original concern. I heard it from what I thought was another councilwoman, that this bike path was critical. And then I heard from, I think it was a staff member, that with the, if you're looking at this picture, the Charlotte Street, bottom right corner, because of their variance request to not have more public space there, whether it be a sidewalk or road width widening, whatever it is, because this building will not set back like it should per our UDO, that there will not ever be a bike lane right there in theory, and that this interior bike lane will somehow be a connective point to this grid that downtown is trying to plan. I am not on that committee, and I can't speak to how true that is. That is just what I've been told, and that's where my request was coming from, because I had heard it.
Yeah, I think that would apply to Charlotte Street, being an NCDOT-controlled roadway. The city doesn't have any purview to build a bike lane there ourselves, so we're at their mercy. And so this project is an opportunity to have a bike facility on Charlotte Street sooner than it would happen otherwise. I can't really speak to that corner necessarily, except that a bike path, the bike cycle track would tie into the College Street.
Do we have that picture I think Brad was asking about, or there? even
There's
the
a
applicant
diagram
was?
in the overall presentation that talks about the connectivity, and it's conceptual, but there are, in the project condition number 9, it talks, I can't find it now, talks about the, number 14 talks about the sidewalks and the cycle tracks and that sort of thing. So it is, 14A talks about the Charlotte Street cycle track bike facility, and 14B talks about the College Street minimum 6 feet wide bike facility. So if there's any concern
Well, do
about-
you feel like do you have what you need to tell Brad how to write this in the conditions?
I'm sure you can figure it out, and with, I mean,
That
I don't know if I have I think there's only 2 of us who
was a
have it
little-
all, I mean, to be honest.
Will, it sounds like there's already some language in there.
Yeah, I think
about this.
the bike facility language is covered, that's all
I
I'm
think
trying
what
to
my suggestion would
explain.
be is if Councilmember Turner could look at that specific language and see if it meets her needs. If it doesn't, we can perhaps just beef that up with additional information as a proposal.
I thought it was more than my request. It's actually not my request, so I'm willing to let that go if no one else is worried about it. It had come up in previous meetings twice.
Then, Mayor, the last thing I would add is that it is the applicant's decision if they would like to move forward or ask for a continuance, so council will have to defer to them to decide.
I
if
got
they
a
want to
head
make-
nod, but, so I was going on that, but,
Head nod on.
yes.
Is Councilperson Roney still on the line? We still want unanimous approval. So if we don't get it, we understand, but we want to work towards that. And so if it takes another 2 weeks to continue to work through this with you, we're willing to do that.
We appreciate that, because really this is an enormous process so far out of the lane we normally review in. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So what do we need to do?
So we need a motion to continue this item to September 26th.
I will move to continue this item to September
I'll
26th.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And anybody in the audience, email me what you were going to
Yeah,
say, because
email us.
Well,
continue to think a lot.
yeah,
We'll
we-
hear from you on the 26th as well. I know it's been long.
That's true.
But you wouldn't want us to rush something that we weren't ready for, so I appreciate your understanding.
So let's take a break, because it's going to take a little bit to empty the chamber. So we'll come back at 7:45. Okay, we're going to be back on the air here. All right, we're live right now, so welcome back to the Asheville City Council meeting. What I need real quick here before we continue is a motion to continue item B on the public hearings agenda to September 26, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Sandra, second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have our second reading under unfinished business. Brad, I have your name on, did you want to say a couple words about it?
Just briefly, Mayor, as the council will remember from the previous city council meeting, staff is making the proposal for some technical amendments to the two ordinances currently dealing with solicitation. Those two ordinances specifically are sections 11-5 and 11-14. The proposal was provided to council, which would update the current language of those to comply with the latest federal court decisions. They add no new penalties, no additional or increased criminal penalties or civil penalties for any violations, but they are intended purely to add some specificity and remove some ambiguity in the current language of our pre-existing ordinances, which have not been updated in many, many, many years. But I'm happy to answer any questions that council members may have.
All right, council, do I have a motion to approve? Go ahead. Somebody's got to make did you want to say something, or do you want to make a motion to approve?
No.
Go ahead and make a motion. It's just a motion to approve item A under unfinished business.
I don't have it
Do we
pulled
need
up.
the motion again?
Oh, I don't have it pulled up.
Okay, maybe that's the problem. We don't have the motion before us? I don't think there is,
Make a motion to adopt the proposed amendments to the city's public solicitation ordinances, specifically sections 11-5 and 11-14, in accordance with the changes represented in the accompanying staff report.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Sandra, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do we have Kim back?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we have Kim back.
Kim?
She can't vote, but she.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Kim cannot vote. Sorry.
I am opposed.
But you can't vote. Sorry, just making sure that. Okay. Okay, that concludes our unfinished business. We have a two-part item under new business, and it's called short-term shelters, which is kind of a confusing title, not to be confused with short-term rentals. This is short-term shelters.
That's right, very different from short-term
Right.
rentals. Good evening. I'm Emily Ball with the Homeless Strategy Division. I'm here to talk to you about a shelter initiative that has been led by some folks in our community. Key takeaways, unsheltered homelessness, as we all know, has increased significantly during the pandemic. And based on the needs assessment that you all heard, that our community heard from the National Alliance to End Homelessness in January, they recommended adding 95 new emergency shelter beds to better meet the need. again, that has increased as a result of the pandemic. Our community's planning body is the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, HIAC, and HIAC has identified 3 shelter providers who can collectively add a total of 43 new emergency shelter beds. HIAC, through this process, has asked the city and the county for a combined $1.75 million to fund this initiative, and the county voted on half of that funding, $875,000, last week, did approve that. Beds would be available this fall and would complement the upcoming permanent supportive housing developments and Code Purple to meaningfully expand community capacity to respond to unsheltered homelessness. I think it is an exciting moment in our community. We really have a lot of capacity on the horizon, and I expect that to have a really significant impact in the coming months. Staff are recommending that $875,000 in city ARPA funding be allocated to match the county's funding for this initiative. So again, unsheltered homelessness has increased significantly during the pandemic. We did receive the recommendation from the National Alliance to End Homelessness to add 95 high-access beds to the community shelter inventory to respond to that increase. HIAC, again, as our leadership body, planning body on homelessness in our community, initiated a series of work groups to respond to, or to implement the Alliance recommendations. One of those was a shelter work group, very active in developing a strategy to produce the recommended beds. And through a request for partnership that work group issued, they identified 3 shelter providers who are able to add capacity. So you can see those numbers there. Haywood Street Respite is able to add 3 additional beds. Safe Shelter, which is a collaborative of Trinity United Methodist, Grace Episcopal, and Grace Covenant Presbyterian, are able to add 20 new beds, and then Salvation Army is able to add 20 new beds. Shelter Work Group also, through this process, identified a need to preserve 45 beds that are at risk of closure at Salvation Army because of a funding cliff they're facing. They're primarily funded through some CARES Act funding currently, and that is ending at the end of September. So the work group identified a need to preserve those 45 beds by providing funding to continue that current operation. HIAC approved the work group's recommendations and in response submitted a request to the city and to Buncombe County to a two-part request. One, to provide $1.75 million in funding to add those 43 new beds and preserve the 45 beds at Salvation Army. And 2, to participate in a task force to plan a new permanent high-access shelter. I don't have details about that yet. That planning process is about to get underway. I'm happy to share those updates as that comes together. But HIAC did make that request that the city participate in that along with the county. And then at their September 5th meeting, Buncombe County Commissioners authorized $875,000 in ARPA funding for this initiative, and also authorized an interlocal agreement to provide those funds to the city to administer through contracts with shelter providers, just trying to reduce the administrative burden to those shelter providers so that they would have just one contract rather than multiple.
They'll give us the money to administer it. Yes.
The city, as you know, received about $26 million in ARPA funding and currently has an unallocated balance of about $1.3 million in ARPA funding. And so in alignment with our continued commitment to implement the recommendations from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, staff is recommending that council match the county's contribution and authorize up to $875,000 in remaining ARPA funding to add those 43 beds and preserve the existing 45 beds, and authorize an interlocal agreement to receive and administer the county's matching funds for this initiative. Key takeaways again, this is a capacity expansion for our community in response to the recommendations from the National Alliance to End Homelessness and in response to the increased need that came out of the pandemic. We have a shelter work group participant here who might want to add some additional context, but I think this has been a really strong community planning process, great participatory effort, and great leadership from the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Em. I just wanted to fill out one other data point here. And Emily was talking about me working on this shelter subcommittee of HIAC. Salvation Army, between the time we got the report from the National Alliance to End Homelessness calling for 95 additional beds, Salvation Army had gone ahead and added, as I understand it, 15 beds. So that gained us some ground. That's outside of this.
So really 50.
So the 43, we're really, of the 95 needed, we would be 58 towards that goal with what Salvation Army is doing. And part of this is to help shore up their ability to continue to provide services in the community. So that's what, they have a very challenging funding situation and are dependent actually on, and have been historically, on some federal programs that no longer exist anymore. So as with a lot of things, it's sort of falling to the local governments to figure out how to help continue support these providers. So hopefully that helps. I'm glad to see the county already went ahead and made their approval. We asked that this be moved to this vote be moved up to this meeting, and the county went ahead and took their action because the hope is to have this in place by October 1.
Isn't that amazing? Like, we just got that study back. I didn't work on this. I'm so impressed with all of you that did. Thank you. And to all these folks that are going to open up new beds. I'm just blown away how quickly you all were able to react.
We were sort of too, actually.
This is Kim. I have a question for Brad.
Yes.
I know we've been communicating about this in advance of the meeting. Can you speak to the ability to explicitly name our LGBTQ plus inclusive non-discrimination ordinance for compliance that includes natural hair, pregnancy status, and veteran status?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Roney. So this particular funding source is proposed to come from the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan funds. Because of that, it follows a contractual provisions set that is established by the federal government, which includes a specific provision regulating and prohibiting discriminatory activity as part of the contract. So there will be a non-discrimination provision included in this and every other ARPA contract. In addition to that, I've been working with Emily and members of my office to ensure that in addition to that, we are going to specifically also cite the city's non-discrimination ordinance as a binding effect on this contract as well.
If I can add to that, we have been having many conversations with shelter providers throughout this process. They're all aware of that requirement. Both Haywood Street and Salvation Army currently receive federal funding, and so we're already familiar with those federal requirements. Safe Shelter has a strong commitment to equity and understands the non-discrimination ordinance that's active in our community. So we have addressed that with all three providers, and I feel confident in their ability to comply with that.
Okay, since this is an item not on our public hearings agenda, we'll need a motion, unless there are any other questions, a motion to approve, and then we can take comment. There are two parts. I assume we could have two motions.
I make a motion authorizing the city manager to utilize City of Asheville ARPA funding for short-term shelters, enter into an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County to administer their previously approved $875,000 in ARPA funding for this project, enter into service agreements with Salvation Army, Safe Shelter, and Haywood Street Congregation to preserve 45 existing and create 43 new high-access shelter beds, and approve the associated budget amendment.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We have two people signed up to speak under this item. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Watch the lights on the lectern. And the first person signed up to speak is Nina Tobish.
Good evening, council members and mayor and vice mayor. I'm delighted to see this action by the city. I think this is an extremely worthy use of ARPA funds, and I want to commend this council and city staff and our partners in the not-for-profit sector for commencing to bring online a really significant number of shelter beds and supportive housing for our homeless community. This is going to make a big, big dent in the challenge that we face as a community. I think quite understandably, many are frustrated that things take such a long time to manifest. But I think as these projects come online, people are going to see the incredible contribution that it's going to make to the well-being of our community at large. So I just want to say that, and thank you all for those efforts. I'd like to add one interesting observation, and unfortunately I managed to navigate myself away from the relevant link on my device here. But I recently read an article published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a small study that was done in Canada, which measured the effect of direct cash grants to people who are unhoused in comparison to the costs of the municipality in finding housing for them or sheltering them. And fascinatingly enough, direct cash grants were much less expensive, to the tune of about 15% net difference between the cost of the city having, the municipality having to provide that shelter. So an interesting lesson, and perhaps something to consider as a pilot program for our city, is what happens if you just give people money and let them find the housing themselves. It turns out that it may be cheaper for the city to do it that way than it is for us to try and develop the infrastructure and the circumstances to do it ourselves. I'm happy to send you a citation link to this study. Admittedly, it was a small-scale study, but I think it has interesting possibilities to consider. Thank you for your consideration this evening.
The second and last person signed up to speak under this item is Michael Reardon.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, good evening, and thank you for having us this evening. I am the Reverend Mike Reardon. I am the Associate Rector at Grace Episcopal Church in Asheville.
Do you always speak with like chimes?
Yeah, I'm introduced by the chorus, so I'm the Associate Rector at Grace Episcopal Church in Asheville, and we are the fiscal agent for Safe Shelter, a collaborative between 3 churches in town and 1 nonprofit consultant. And I just want to express and extend my gratitude to all of you for the work that you have done in getting us to this point. I want to reiterate my gratitude for the folks with the Buncombe County Commission who have already voted on this matter, and for all of those on our HIAC committee and specifically the Shelter Work Group who have just worked tirelessly to make sure that we've gotten to this point, who have provided us with all the tools and the information that we've needed along the way, so that we've gone from a point where, in March of last year, I was essentially begging before the Rotary Club for $1,500 to close a gap in funding, to now being at a point where we're looking at a budget of over $400,000 for a year-round shelter at twice the capacity. So thank you for all of your hard work, and if it isn't already obvious, I am overwhelmingly supportive of the use of ARPA funds for these shelter projects, as well as those from the Salvation Army and Haywood Street congregation, who are both wonderful organizations. So thank you and good evening.
Thank you. All right, Council, we don't have anyone else signed up to speak under this item. We have a motion and a second, so any other questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and we have a second motion on the budget amendment. It was an all-inclusive one-time.
I read the one
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then that concludes this item.
You clearly listened in great detail.
Yeah, I will. I am always focused. Okay, we have concluded our printed agenda, so we're going to move into general public comment. And folks who are signed up for public comment, again, 3 minutes to speak. Watch the lights on the lectern, and green means go, orange or yellow, whatever. It's Maggie's demonstrating it for you now. Means you're almost done, and then red means your time is up. So the first person signed up to speak is Roger Turner.
I want to take this opportunity to thank the council and the mayor. I belong to a local group, Healthcare for All WNC, and a statewide group called North Carolina Medicare for All. This is our second presentation to the council regarding a resolution to support of the Medicare for All Act of 2023, Senate Bill 1655. I believe all of you have recently received emails about this resolution. In April 2019, Mayor Mannheimer made a proclamation in support of Medicare for All. However, a resolution is a far stronger statement from the City Council, one that calls for our state and federal legislators to work towards the immediate enactment of Medicare for All. You will be joining other North Carolina municipalities, Greensboro, Durham, Carrboro, and Orange County. We believe all residents of Asheville and Buncombe County deserve adequate and comprehensive health care without premiums, co-pays, or other deductibles. The ever-rising cost of health care affects us locally. Some of you may feel this is a federal issue that's decided in Congress, but the local effects are really quite impressive, especially those people starting small businesses, and will continue to challenge our strapped state and municipal budgets. I'm sure some of you on the council would have a much better idea of how much of our municipal budget goes to healthcare costs. In the Medicare Act for 2023 is passed into law, it will begin to redress past and present inequities and provide reparation to our communities of color. As MLK once famously said, the worst inequality of all is in healthcare. 62% of all personal bankruptcy in the U.S. is due to medical debt. 1 in 5 North Carolinians have medical debt. In Asheville, as in the rest of the U.S., people of color are less likely to have health care. If you have any questions, I've left my contact information with the clerk of court, and thank you.
Thank you. You mean city clerk, but Maggie, we're going to elevate you to clerk of court. It is confusing. Okay, next speaker is John Nicolay. That's pretty funny.
Good evening. Are we having fun? Mayor, members of council, thanks for your time tonight. I'm not going to take my full time. I had some things prepared that I want to talk about, but I think my timing would be bad in light of what I think was kind of a difficult hour or two you had just before this meeting. I'm kind of a glasses half full person, but I've only met a couple of you here. I'm a newcomer. So I think it would be bad for me to try and convince you that I mean some things that I wanted to say constructively because you don't know me. But I wanted to talk about the subject of leadership in a 3-minute sermon. But I'm not going to do that. What I'd like to do, because if I were you, I'd be worn out at this point. I'd like to come back another time. Could I, in exchange for a minute and a half, can I just hand out a letter that was kind of...
Absolutely. Hand it to
Perfect. Even better.
Our clerk of court. She will.
Clerk of court.
She will hand it.
Yeah. That was it. I look forward to meeting all of you another time, and we'll talk at another time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rachel Bliss.
Hi, everybody. There were supposed to be 2 of us tonight, but
the previous part of the meeting lasted so long that she had to go. But anyway, I'm here to say that I am a proponent of peace, along with many others in the Asheville area. We live on ancient Cherokee lands, and we want to be free of the ravages of war. Therefore, we declare our observance of International Day of Peace and Nonviolence on Thursday, September 21st, and Saturday, September 23rd. Both days were instituted by the United Nations. The Day of Peace became an annual event in 1981, whereas the Day of Nonviolence, which falls on Mahatma Gandhi's October 2nd birthday, was added in 2007. We here in Asheville have been celebrating International Day of Peace for 14 years now. We recognize that weapons of war are the major contributions to climate devastation while profiting from the destruction of Earth. Plus, the potential use of nuclear weapons will lead to the end of civilization as we know it. And I'm glad that the city signed on to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty that is through the United Nations. We demand diplomacy, compromise, and right sharing in order to remove ourselves from this culture of violence. We must do this every day of our lives. Thus, we've set aside these 2 days to imagine a peaceful world where we celebrate our diversity and resolve our conflicts in non-violent ways. As Mahatma Gandhi himself reminds us, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So we invite you and all the citizens of Asheville, Western North Carolina, to walk for peace on Thursday, September 21st, beginning at the Ingalls parking lot in West Asheville. Then on Saturday, we honor our Peacemaker of the Year, Terry Clark, and his wife, Brita, as well as honorees on our honor roll, who will be Rusty Civilis, Glenda McDowell, and Chris Berg. So join us as we unite our hearts and voices to imagine a world free of war and to celebrate the possibilities of peace and disarmament. I won't be able to go through all 32 endorsing groups, but you all received an email from me that had the names of those endorsing groups.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Jen Hampton.
Hi, y'all. Okay, well, I'm just here. Well, I think I said hi. Good evening. It's been a long night, as you know. I'm just here to give y'all an update on the tourism taxes for affordable housing campaign and coalition that I'm a part of. And just to clarify, I'm here tonight in my role as the chair of Asheville Food and Beverage United. We're a part of this coalition. And in case you don't know what the campaign is, we are trying to lobby the TDA for some of their new LIFT funds to be used for affordable housing and to have service worker representation on the LIFT committee that will decide how those funds are awarded through grants. We believe that workers generate the revenue and should have a voice in how that revenue is used. Like I said, we want the LIFT funds. I already told you that part. I'll just tell you a little bit about the campaign. So about 3 months worth of time, we had dozens of canvassers going out on countless shifts, knocking on doors, going into businesses, talking to workers. We got about 2,300 signatures in that time, and almost all of those were real in-person conversations that we had with community members. So we know that the community definitely supports this. They support both asks, and I also just want to plug that James Sutherland has applied to be appointed to the LIFT committee. And I know that y'all don't make these decisions, but you do know people who do. And, you know, I just want to put it out there that we think that he would be an awesome representative of the service worker community as well as the business owner community, because he owned a successful business downtown for 8 years, built a loyal customer base of locals, and his employees were incredibly loyal as well because he treated them well. And we know that he will look out for our best interests. So I guess in closing, I just want to say that if we make using the LIFT funds a priority for the community benefit, it could really mean a major shift in the public perception of tourism. A lot of workers, a lot of residents feel a lot of vitriol towards tourism because they don't see any benefit to the community of it, that all the benefit just goes up to capital owners, business owners. And, you know, workers support the tourism industry, and we feel like the tourism industry could really support the workers and the community at large, make a difference for all of us. So that's it. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jensen Gelfand?
Good evening. My name is Jensen Gelfand. I live in West Asheville, and I am here to talk about the solicitation ordinance. I know it's already been passed, but I know there's change in the future, and there will, I'm sure, be plenty yet to do on that. Just wanted to encourage the city to think about a deeper level of engagement with citizens, even a deeper level of engagement with the people who are soliciting or panhandling. How can we know exactly what to do about this situation if we don't even reach out to the people who will be affected most by these regulations? I think it is important to make it a broader conversation. I did not see that happening within the Public Safety and Environment Committee or here in council, and there's a lot more work to do, so I hope you'll really broaden the conversation on that. There's lots of things to be thinking about here. How is a $500 fine for soliciting when someone breaks that 8-foot barrier going to affect that person when they can't pay it? And how will they end up going into the criminal justice system? And how will that affect this person? How will it affect our community? These are all questions that have not even been discussed, much less addressed in any meaningful way. And I hope the council will take this on with gusto. I think that the idea of, do we even need a solicitation ordinance, and why was this put in back in the old days? We are not required to have a solicitation ordinance, and we didn't have any discussion about that as a community or as a council. I think it's important to start at square zero on this and really have an honest conversation about where this comes from and what to do. I will be helping to coordinate a conversation that is a community conversation, but of course folks from council are welcome to come. This will be in West Asheville this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. At the 12 Baskets building on 610 Haywood Road. I think the community needs to be discussing this and understanding really where we need to go with public safety. I know that we're no longer formally in the period of reimagining public safety anymore, but there are a lot of conversations that need to be had, and I look forward to participating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And since you're going to host a community forum, please follow the Public Safety Subcommittee agenda. I don't know if they'll choose to continue the discussion around solicitation, but and I only say that because this morning on Blue Ridge Public Radio, they were saying that tonight we were going to discuss an expansion of solicitation, and I quickly emailed the host of this morning's show to clarify that we were not doing that, and she corrected that information, so I just want to make sure that information's clear.
Right, so the
community.
next conversation will be on the 26th of this month in the
In the
EPS
subcommittee.
committee.
And it currently is on the agenda for discussion? Yes. I mean, whether or not and what to do, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. I have Pastor Ronald Gates on here, but I don't see him anymore. Right. I don't see him, okay. I also have Christopher Charmonte on here, but I also don't see him anymore. Okay. Paul Howell.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city manager, city attorney, and as always, the glue that holds everything together, Maggie. It was my intention to come up here this evening and talk more about the swimming pool that isn't. But since Saturday I was involved, First, let me thank Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore, Council Member Antoinette Mosley, Councilmember Sage Turner, City Worker Stephanie Gilliam. I think she's a constituent. Yeah, constituent services. For y'all's quick response to my email that I sent to everybody that I could. I be on North Market Street every Saturday morning at the city market they have down there. And most of the people that goes to that market are older people and kids. And you got people that come down Woodland Street. I see the speed limit, I think it's 35, but you got people that come down there doing 45, 50 speeding. You got the crosswalks right there that sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And you got people at the stand there, I guess without the crosswalk changing for 2 or 3 times, getting impatient trying to get on across the street. I've seen quite a few people almost get hit. But you got some bushes right there in front of the wood. I think that's the Woodford Apartments, some bushy rose, flower bushes, something that blocks people from being able to see the traffic coming and avoids the traffic from seeing them standing there. So if anybody cuts that curb quick, they're liable to get hit. If anybody steps down off the curb to try to look around the bush, they're liable to get hit. I'm bringing this to y'all's attention now because I know this is something that can be handled before next Saturday, before they have the next city market, as far as moving the bushes out of the way and making sure the crosswalks work. I didn't come with no bad intentions tonight. Just want to say thank you all for what y'all doing. And that's all.
David Moritz.
Hi, I want to talk about the Pack Square plan, and first of all, I just want to say our love affair of cars has created a lot of damage to our cities, mainly with significant large surface parking lots, and then the major roads that we built where people go super fast. One example is, of course, the development that you were talking about recently. I counted the spaces. There's about 475 surface parking spaces there. Which is absurd for a downtown area. And how I'm going to get towards the Pack Square project, because I think we need to be bold here, is one of the things that we did in the name of urban planning and the urban renewal is the South Charlotte Street Highway. It's a 5-lane highway that cut off the East End neighborhood from the block. Those neighborhoods were connected. My view is it was purposely done, a 5-lane highway. The only access is the overhead bridge. To me, I think if we're going to be doing the Pack Square plan, first of all, the Pack Square plan should have no car access. There's no reason cars need to be going through every road in this city. We need to start making pedestrian roads. Pack Square is the first opportunity we have to make a pedestrian neighborhood. And then what we could do and that would connect the block, and then on South Charlotte Street, that should be reduced to 3 lanes with parking on both sides, paid parking, and all those funds can go towards the block, the neighborhood centers in the block, or the East End neighborhood. there is no reason why that South Charlotte Street should be a 5-lane highway. I almost got run over myself crossing Tunnel Road, or College Street. A car came down, it was a green light for me, and he didn't stop, and he made a right turn going 50 miles an hour, same thing. And so, and I think it'd be a big improvement to Pack Square to make it all walkable. I mean, think of Central Park and the parks there. We don't have cars going through now. They've blocked a lot of those roads. We shouldn't be having cars going through Pack Square if we're gonna make it a usable pedestrian park for people. We need our city to be for people, not for cars. And I mean, look at streets like Wall Street. There's no reason cars should be going down Wall Street. Same thing with Pack Square. I mean, I know there's a fire station there, and there's some cross streets, and of course I want it to be connected to the block, but the block should also be connected to East End neighborhood, and that would be accomplished by doing a significant reduction in the traffic of South Charlotte Street and having parking there. The parking there would allow people to walk through the block to get to downtown, would make it a much more vibrant area if people parked on South Charlotte Street. It would also provide parking for the service workers. I know that there's an issue there. So to me, that would at least repair some of the damage that was done during urban renewal, creating these big highways that blocked. The same thing happened with Ashland and McDowell Street. It completely disconnected those neighborhoods with downtown, and I think we need to start fixing those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Wainscott.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I just wanted to quickly touch on something that Ms. Mosley said at the last meeting. It was in regards to the bike lanes, but it really had nothing to do with the bike lanes. It was that you feared that perhaps in 20 years, or the possibility in 20 years, that people would look back on this city council and find that it had done damage to the black community. And there are so many previous city councils before this that have done much greater damage. I mean, the very first one that was set up in 1931 featured a high level of disenfranchisement before this body was even created, and our very first city attorney that was chosen by that city council was one of those Merriman boys who was from a quite white supremacist family. And of course we had the redlining maps developed in the 1930s. In the 50s, the city of Asheville sold its River Park swimming pool rather than integrate. In 1975, the city council refused to appoint Dr. Otis Michael to mayor, even though he'd won the most number of votes. And in 1948, Paul Robeson was interested in speaking here in Asheville with a fully integrated audience, and he petitioned the city council to make that happen, and they declined his request. Floyd McKissick Sr. came here and probably stood right where I am right now to make that request, and he was denied. Now, oddly, in 2019, however, I think great damage was done to the black community when we, unfortunately, renewed our 1931 born in white supremacy election system. It breaks my heart that Mrs. Smith's name was on that, as I've told you in private. And I voted for you for the chance to reverse that history. I know that you're concerned about your legacy, and I would hate to see this city council do things that harm the black community by action or inaction. And you also mentioned that you are kind of tired of seeing white people come and talk about how they want their stuff and how much it benefits the black community. And that conversation in all of 2019 was just a parade of white people who didn't know what they were talking about. And unfortunately, we still have this legacy. So it's my hope that you will change history, because it's in the palm of your hand if you choose to do so. So thank you very much.
Mr. Matthew Bacote.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council persons, and all of your support people that's here. I'm here for the first time in a long time, but I want to say something I hope will help you all make your decision if it hasn't already been made. And that is that shortly we're going to have to do something about our city manager, whether we retain the city manager or whether the city manager will leave. I'm hoping that you all will stay with the city manager that we've got now. The reason for that is because I worked with a lot of city managers over the past 70 years. But when this city manager that we have now came to work in Asheville, approximately 6 weeks after taking over the job, one of the worst situations that any city manager has ever confronted with, she was confronted with it. And that was the Black Lives Matter activity. I recall the city manager standing in the vestibule of the city hall, police department, and noise sounded, and the city manager jumped and looked around. She's in the police department, possibly the most safe place it could be, but she jumped. After that, it was necessary to take over the job of her job as city manager. However, it was difficult, I'm sure, to do so because of the fact that Black Lives Matter activity was going on for about 17 months, which is additional duty that had to be taken care of, and that was taken care of along with the regular duty for the city manager. When you are managing 17 department heads or 19 department heads, along with all the other responsibility, it requires a real tall and strong and knowledgeable person in order to carry that out and keep the city sane. I'm hoping that the decision that will be made to retain will be to retain our current city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. And you'll be happy to know that we made an announcement at the beginning of the meeting, which was a really long time ago, that Ms. Campbell will be renewing her contract for another 2-year period this coming December. So, thank you. That was our final speaker for this evening, and we don't have a closed session, thankfully. So, we are adjourned.